Hello. Hi. We are live. I'm using a new streaming program since Wirecast did not work out, so I've gone to the obvious OBS, and it appears to be working fine. Anyways, that's just, neither here nor there. This is starting soon. So, hearing entitled, "No Company is Above the Law, the Need to End Illegal Union Busting at Starbucks." Coverage begins at 10 a.m. Okay, let's hope the actual thing begins at 10. Otherwise, I'll have to go through some, clips and stuff. But how's everything sounding? Everything good? No problems? If you were here for this, I did a random live stream on Monday. I didn't keep it up, but I wanted to test out a different camera. And anyways, it was the entire thing was a technical mess. The mic didn't work. It was all a bunch of crap. But this is good. This is working nicely. Progressive Boomer says, "Thanks for your insight over the last year." Thank you so much for being a member for 12 months. Howard Schultz is going to be so petty. Speaking of which, where is there's supposed to be? Oh, here we go. This is the chat should be appearing behind me at some point. There it is. Sweet, it's working. Look at that. Fantastic. Petty. So because I have to think, at least partially because of this hearing that is about to happen, he decided to step down from Starbucks. So there is actually a new CEO right now. Just going to, pressure can work sometimes. Sometimes shaming people is actually a way to make changes. It's not it's nothing to rely on, but at least in this specific case, Starbucks is being held accountable. So since this is going to start maybe in 2 minutes, I'll leave the audio on so we will hear it if it starts. But there is a video that Bernie put out in anticipation of this. Let me put the audio up. Let's see if this is good.
Starbucks as we look. What is Starbucks as we look to the future? We are a people company, which should be more clear now than ever before.
The National Labor Relations Board says Starbucks broke the law.
A people company.
Relates to the company's alleged treatment of workers who unionized 4 Pittsburgh locations. The board found management intimidated workers and attempted union busting.
What we are seeing right now at this moment in history is, despite the fact that the billionaire class have never done better, corporate profits are soaring. We are seeing these very same corporations, and it's not just Starbucks, believe me, pour hundreds of millions of dollars in efforts to make it impossible for workers to exercise their constitutional rights to form a union. You can be pro-union, you can be anti-union. But what we have got to establish today is that workers have the constitutional right to form a union. And what we're seeing in company after company after company, people who want to join unions being fired.
Starbucks is now facing another union battle after the coffee giant announced it's shutting down its cafe in Ithaca, New York. Shutting down. That just voted to unionize back in April. The union believes the closure is a form of retaliation.
We're seeing workers being taken into back rooms and being lectured about how terrible unions are. We're seeing people being intimidated.
The National Labor Relations Board says Starbucks workers were right. The federal board issued a complaint confirming allegations of intimidation and discrimination against employees involved in the Starbucks Workers United Union.
That is not what is supposed to be happening in America. So the message from me, at least, that's going to go out today is that we are a nation of law. And that even if you are a multi-billion-dollar corporation, with all kinds of consultants and accountants, you know what? You are going to obey the law. And in this country, workers have the right to form unions.
All right. Countdown. We're at 10:01. Some chats here. Let me get through some chats. The mic sounds great. Thank you. Is Schultz actually going to be there? Yes. No. He tried to get out of it by stepping down from Starbucks, but no, he's going to be there. So I also got some back. So this is the Washington Post stream, but it's just the general stream. But I got some backups in case some weirdness happens. C-SPAN, I imagine, would be having it. Here it is. It says live. Let's check it out.
This is the Anchor Ever.
Okay, they're going to do their little ad. I'm going to say I don't care.
And let me get to the point.
Okay, so the Washington Post is late.
Hearing.
Here we go. Got to turn this up.
Today in our country, over 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, and millions are working for starvation wages. Unbelievably, despite an explosion in technology and huge increases in worker productivity, the average American worker is making $50 a week less than he or she made 50 years ago after adjusting for inflation. Unless we change the nature of the way our economy works, it is all too likely that our younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents. What this means in reality is that workers throughout our country are struggling to pay for housing.
Should I go full screen?
Struggling to pay for health care and prescription drugs.
Okay.
Struggling to put food on the table. Struggling to pay off their student debts and to deal with other basic necessities of life. And while that is the reality for the working class of this country, here is another reality, and that is that the people on top have never, ever had it so good. Today in America, we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had, with the top 1% now owning more wealth than the bottom 90%, with CEOs now making 400 times what their workers are making, and with 3 people at the top owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. That is the economic reality that exists today. People on top doing extraordinarily well, millions of working families struggling. And as a result of that economic reality, what we are now seeing is a major increase in trade union organizing. Throughout our country, in blue-collar jobs and in white-collar jobs, workers are standing up and they are fighting back to form unions in order to improve their wages, their benefits, and their working conditions. These workers know, as I do, that union workers earn 20% more on average than non-union workers. These workers also know, as I do, that union workers have better health care benefits, better paid family and medical leave policies, are much more likely to have a pension, and are less likely to be victims of health and safety violations compared to non-union workers. At a time when 71% of the American people now approve of unions, the highest level since 1965, there has been a major revitalization of the trade union movement in this country. Between 2021 and 2022, the number of union elections taking place in America has gone up by 53%. And since 2020, workers have voted to form a union in over 70% of union elections. Rather extraordinary. And now that is the good news for those of us who understand that strong unions are a vital part of rebuilding the declining middle class in this country. That's the good news. The bad news is that in order to combat this increase in union organizing, corporations have engaged in an unprecedented level of illegal union busting activities, which takes us to the focus of today's hearings. Over the past 18 months, Starbucks has waged the most aggressive and illegal union busting campaign in the modern history of our country. That union busting campaign has been led by Howard Schultz, the multi-billionaire founder and director of Starbucks, who is with us this morning only under the threat of subpoena. Let us be clear about the nature of Starbucks' vicious anti-union efforts. The National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, has filed over 80 complaints against Starbucks for violating federal labor law. There have been over 500 unfair labor practice charges lodged against the company, and judges have found that Starbucks broke the law 130 times across 6 states since workers began organizing in the fall of 2021. These violations include the illegal firing of more than a dozen Starbucks workers for the crime of exercising their right to form a union and to collectively bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. Since the first Starbucks union was certified more than 450 days ago in Buffalo, workers at more than 360 stores across 40 states have held union elections. 83% of these elections have resulted in a union victory, and today nearly 300 Starbucks coffee shops employing more than 7,000 workers have a union, despite Starbucks' aggressive anti-union efforts. But with nearly 300 shops voting to form a union, Starbucks has refused to sign a single first contract with the union. Not a single one. Think about that. Think about a multi-billion-dollar company with unlimited resources, with all kinds of lawyers, advisors, consultants, and yet they have not yet signed one contract with any of their nearly 300 unionized shops. Just a few weeks ago, on March 1st, an administrative law judge found Starbucks guilty of, quote, egregious and widespread misconduct, end quote, which showed, quote, a general disregard for the employee's fundamental rights, end quote. In a 220-page ruling, this judge found that Starbucks illegally retaliated against employees for unionizing, promised improved pay and benefits if workers rejected the union, conducted illegal surveillance of pro-union workers, refused to hire prospective employees who supported the union, relocated union organizers to new stores, and overstaffed stores ahead of union votes, all clear violations of federal labor law. The judge also found that Starbucks, quote, widespread coercive behavior over 6 months had permeated every store in the Buffalo market, end quote. The judge ordered Starbucks to reinstate 7 workers who were wrongfully terminated, reopen a pro-union store in Buffalo that was illegally shut down, and pay, quote, reasonable consequential damages, end quote, to more than 24 Starbucks workers whose rights were violated by the company. And let us be clear, Starbucks' egregious union-busting campaign is not limited to Buffalo. It is happening all over America. Federal courts in Tennessee and Michigan have issued emergency injunctions requiring Starbucks to reinstate workers who were illegally fired and to prohibit the coffee chain from firing workers for supporting unionization efforts in the future. In Scottsdale and Phoenix, Arizona, the NLRB has charged Starbucks with committing 8 violations of labor law when it disciplined, fired, and forced out workers because they cooperated with federal investigations. On November 30th of last year, the NLRB found that Starbucks unlawfully refused to recognize and bargain with the union at its Reserve Roastery store in Seattle. NLRB judges have found that Starbucks illegally threatened to withhold benefits, including health insurance, from pro-union workers in Denver, Overland Park, Kansas, Seattle, Washington, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. The pattern in all of these stores is clear. On one hand, we have workers making $13, $14, $15 an hour with minimal benefits, working 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, maybe 40 hours a week, depending on a totally unpredictable schedule dictated by their managers. And these workers are out there struggling today to achieve dignity and justice on the job. That's what they are trying to do, and I applaud their efforts. And on the other hand, we have a corporation worth some $113 billion, largely controlled by an individual worth some $4 billion, who are using their unlimited resources to do everything possible, legal and illegal, to deny these workers their constitutional right to form a union. The fundamental issue we are confronting today is whether we have a system of justice that applies to all, or whether billionaires and large corporations can break the law with impunity. I have read Mr. Schultz's comments to the media, in which he expresses his strong anti-union views. As an American, Mr. Schultz is entitled to those views and any other views he holds. But even if he is a multi-billionaire and the head of a giant corporation, he is not entitled to break the law. So today I will be asking Mr. Schultz whether he will do what an administrative law judge has ordered him to do, and that is to record and distribute a 14-page notice which states that Starbucks has violated federal labor law, to inform Starbucks employees all across this country about their rights under the National Labor Relations Act, how Starbucks has violated those rights, and to assure that Starbucks will not infringe upon those rights in the future. In other words, I will be asking Mr. Schultz whether or not he intends to obey the law. Further, I will be asking Mr. Schultz another question, and that is whether or not he is prepared to promise this committee that within 14 days of this hearing, Starbucks will exchange proposals with the union, something that it has refused to do for more than 450 days, so that meaningful progress can be made to bargain a first contract in good faith. And let me conclude by saying that what is outrageous to me is not only Starbucks' anti-union activities, and their willingness to break the law. It is their calculated and intentional efforts to stall, and to stall. They understand that the turnover rate at Starbucks and many other similar type companies is high. They understand that if workers do not see success in gaining a contract, they are going to get discouraged and give up the fight. At a time when we want, in this difficult time in our country, for people to stand up and fight for their rights, to try to destroy the spirit of thousands and thousands of people who are fighting for justice, that, to my mind, is unforgivable. Senator Cassidy.
I'm really curious how
Thank
Republicans
you,
are
Chairman
going to
Sanders.
treat this.
Workers have a right to organize. Now, some may disagree as to whether the protections for workers who choose to organize should also apply to workers who choose not to organize. That's my position, but examining this nuance is not an issue here. The title of today's hearing is "No Company is Above the Law, the Need to End Illegal Union Busting at Starbucks." Now, that clearly presumes that Mr. Schultz and his former employee are guilty before the allegations are fully investigated.
They're investigated.
The title
They're
suggests
guilty.
that this hearing is not a good faith effort to get at the facts.
They've already said they're guilty.
It's a smear campaign against
I
an
did a story on
individual and a company and a company based upon allegations that everyone knows are still under litigation. I am not here to defend Starbucks. I have my own questions about the alleged misconduct, and the law should be followed and upheld. I agree with the chair, no one is above the law. But let's not kid ourselves. This is not a fair and impartial hearing. Now, it's not surprising that Mr. Schultz was reluctant to testify. When the majority is using the title of the hearing to slander the witness we're asking to testify.
Starbucks committed egregious
sends a
misconduct
signal.
during Buffalo Area Union Drive.
The majority
NLRB
points to
judge.
claims of Starbucks misconduct filed at the National Labor Relations Board to justify today's hearing.
It's already happened.
These
guilty.
allegations should be addressed and they should be investigated, period. But it would be malpractice for this committee to not also acknowledge that NLRB is currently facing its own credibility crisis. The NLRB confirmed there are 4 separate allegations of NLRB employee interference, 3 in which the employer was Starbucks, pending before the board. It begs the question, are NLRB employees weaponizing the agency against American employers to benefit politically connected labor unions? The National Labor Relations Act was passed to provide an unbiased framework to review disputes between employers and employees. The NLRB carries out the law and is required to
yes,
protect
unions
the
have
rights
so
of
much
all
power over
parties in a
politicians.
labor
That's why they've
dispute,
been decimated
not
for
put
30
their
years.
thumb on the scale in favor of unions.
What are you
But that
talking
is
about?
not what we appear to be seeing in practice. An NLRB hearing officer recently substantiated reports of voting irregularities in a union election at a Starbucks in Kansas.
If they had
that
power,
could
they would already have a
potentially
contract.
elevate to the level of misconduct by NLRB employees.
People are ridiculous.
This includes NLRB staff providing duplicate ballots, supplying union organizers with confidential voter information, providing voter accommodations to employees selected by the union without offering them to all employees. Regardless of the outcome, these actions are in direct violation of federal law and NLRB written guidelines. Now today, we'll hear from former Congressman Bradley Byrne. He is representing the brave whistleblower who brought this misconduct and weaponization of the agency to light. He'll be able to provide more insight into how the NLRB is operating in violation of its own practices and a procedure in a way which favors labor unions. Let's be clear, and one more time, workers have a legal right to unionize. Companies cannot break the law to prevent unionization. Similarly, unions should not be allowed to intimidate workers into unionizing through coercion or by banning secret ballot elections.
The companies
which the
can intimidate them
Supreme
to
Court has
not
stated,
unionize
quote,
on
"Indeed,
work
the
hours?"
preferred, end quote, method to gauge worker support of unionization.
Where's the actual
this is
pressure
a
coming
conversation
from?
this committee can have and will continue to have. But the bottom line is that a federal agency has no right to break the law to advance a political agenda. And this should be something that our committee investigates on a bipartisan basis.
Unhinged.
The committee is going to properly investigate concerns over labor relations at Starbucks. We should also investigate alleged misconduct of the agency that sought to influence the union representation process.
They don't have a contract.
At last week's hearing, I said we
They
should
haven't won
thoughtfully
anything.
examine legitimate policy issues.
This is so
Not
absurd.
hold show trials for public shaming. Today looks like more of what we saw last week. There are important bipartisan things the committee needs to accomplish. We need to work together on real solutions to issues facing American families, like the high cost of prescription drugs, getting Americans back to work, driving down inflation that is choking economic growth. Instead, we put CEOs on the dock, but instead of a cage in which the prisoner was formerly kept, is a desk in front of the committee where a judgment has already been made. Thank you, and I look forward to
and your head is
today's
under that desk between his
testimony.
legs.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. We will now
Disgusting
turn
individual.
to our witness. Mr. Howard Schultz is the former longtime Chief Executive Officer of Starbucks and a member of the Starbucks Board of Directors. Mr. Schultz, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, and Senators of the committee. I'm pleased to be here this morning and tell the entrepreneurial story of Starbucks and how we have carried the American flag to 84 countries around the world. My vision for Starbucks Coffee Company has always been steeped in humanity, respect, and shared success. It's a vision that was inspired by the struggles of my father, a World War II veteran who slipped on a sheet of ice in 1960 and was promptly fired from his job as a delivery driver. It fractured our family, and it deeply scarred me. I decided at an early age that if I was ever in a position to run a business, it would be based on respect and shared success. With my one-year term as Starbucks interim CEO having come to a close, I appear before you today with love and gratitude for what we have built at Starbucks over these last 40 years.
Is that why you left, you bitch?
The essential operating approach at Starbucks since 1987, when we had just 11 stores, has focused on values-based decisions. We've always believed that if we exceed the expectations of our people, they in turn will exceed the expectations of our customers. We call our employees partners. This is a very important point to share with the committee.
Yeah, it's fake.
Because since 1991, we established shared ownership for every single person at Starbucks, full and part-time. Unprecedented. More than 30
Yet
years
they have
ago,
no power
before
over
the
the
company's
workplace?
IPO, Starbucks created 2 unprecedented benefits for our partners. It was the first of its kind in all of American business, never done before. Starbucks Beanstalk program, a stock equity program, and access to health care almost 25 years before the Affordable Care Act for full and part-time workers who work 20 hours a week. My written testimony has details on the benefits and opportunities we've created for our people over the past 40 years. This represents decades of work striving to build a different kind of company that lifts our customers and gives our partners a chance at a better life.
Yet you broke the law.
According to Aon, one of the
Several
most
times.
respected benefits and HR consultancies in the country, this is their voice, not ours. There's literally no company in our competitive set of retail that offers higher value benefits than Starbucks in the United States. And Senators, we did this by building a direct relationship with our partners, built on trust and shared success, based on a 40-year track record of benefits and actions to create opportunity. Today, baristas in our stores earn on average $17.50. Respectfully, that's more than the minimum wage of every senator that's represented a state on this committee, including, respectfully, Chairman Sanders, where the minimum wage in Vermont is $13.18. We're at $17.50. With benefits
Do you
and other
understand
income
how
included,
state
such
laws
as
work?
100%
And
paid
senators,
college
when
tuition,
that's not their
the
job?
first of its kind in American business. comprehensive health insurance, and Beanstalk
Holy
equity,
shit.
the average value approaches $27 an hour. And what I'm most proud of is today 63% of our retail managers started out as hourly baristas, underscoring the opportunity we provide for shared growth and success, and our employee retention is twice the industry average. Let me repeat. Employee retention at Starbucks is twice the industry average. And
you
throughout
broke
our
the law.
history, we have addressed the issues most critical and most important to our people,
None of this is a defense.
including pay equity, paid sick leave, fully paid parental leave, support of our partner networks, financial literacy, sustainability, hiring military veterans and their spouses, over 30,000 to date, partnering on food security, and offering industry-leading mental health support. The vision and track record and ongoing pathway for employees has led our industry. A small number of our partners, about 1%, have chosen a different approach, as is their right under law. And while we care deeply about each and every one of our partners, we are limited by law in what we can unilaterally do in union environments.
By the way, this
We are
chat behind me is
100%
freezing every now
committed
and then.
to
I don't
fulfilling
know
our
why.
obligations
There we go.
as an employer under the National Labor Relations Act, and are committed to good faith negotiations on first contracts for each unionized store. A year ago, I came back to Starbucks as interim CEO and concluded that assignment last week. While not a one-year fix, we are back on the right path and have demonstrated that by $1.4 billion of employee-facing investments that we made this year. Every day, we wake up thinking about how we can put our people first, put them in a position to win, and do everything we can to demonstrate the conscience, the heart, and the values of Starbucks Coffee Company. That has been the Starbucks way for the last 40 years, since 1987, when we had 11 stores and 100 employees. With that, I welcome your questions.
No defense of
Schultz,
breaking
thank you
labor
very
law
much.
over 100 times.
My time is limited, as is the time of all of our members here. So I'm going to be asking you to respond to each question as briefly as you can, hopefully with a yes or a no. Do you understand that in America, workers have a fundamental right to join a union and collectively bargain to improve wages, benefits, and working conditions? Do you understand that?
I understand, and we respect the right of every partner who wears a green apron, whether they choose to join a union or not.
Are you aware that NLRB judges have ruled that Starbucks violated federal labor law over 100 times during the past 18 months, far more than any other corporation in America?
Sir, Starbucks Coffee Company unequivocally, and let me set the tone for this very early on, has not broken the law.
Okay. Are you aware that on March 1st, 2023, an administrative law judge found Starbucks guilty of, quote, egregious and widespread misconduct, end quote, widespread coercive behavior, and showed, quote, a general disregard for the employees' fundamental rights, end quote, in a union organizing campaign that started in Buffalo, New York in 2021. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that those are allegations, and Congress has created a process that we are following, and we're confident that those allegations will be proven false.
All right. Mr. Schultz, before answering
my
the
God.
following questions,
I didn't a
Let me
lot of
remind
coverage on
you
this.
that
It's
federal
very
law-
clear what they did.
at 18 U.S. Code Section 1001 prohibits knowingly and willfully making any fraudulent statement.
I understand that.
Were you ever informed of or involved in a decision to fire a worker who was part of a union organizing drive?
I was not.
Were you ever informed of or involved in a decision to discipline a worker in any way who was part of a union organizing drive?
I was not.
Have you ever threatened, coerced, or intimidated a worker for supporting a union?
I've had conversations that could have been interpreted in a different way than I intended. That's up to the person who received the information
So,
that I
yes.
spoke to
Okay.
him about.
Were you informed of or involved in the decision to withhold benefits from Starbucks workers in unionized stores, including higher pay and faster sick time accrual?
My understanding, when we created the benefits in May, 1 month after I returned as CEO, my understanding was
talking.
under the law, we did not have the unilateral right to provide those benefits to employees who were interested in joining a union.
Am I hearing you say that you were involved in the decision to withhold benefits from Starbucks workers in unionized stores? Is that what I'm hearing?
It was my understanding that we could not provide those benefits under the law.
So yes,
Schultz, have you ever asked a Starbucks worker,
That's
quote,
illegal.
if you hate Starbucks so much, why don't you go work somewhere else?
I'm glad you asked that question because I've read in the press that quote, and that's not exactly what I said. Can I tell the story? Do you mind?
I have some other questions. I'm sorry. There are a lot of people.
I think it's important to hear the facts.
All right, you'll have your chance. Will you commit to testifying in any trial where you personally are accused of breaking federal labor law, something that you have been accused of doing nearly 100 times since 2021?
Mr. Chairman, let me say under oath, these are allegations and Starbucks has not broken the law.
Okay. Mr. Schultz, were you informed of or involved in this?
What does he mean by law? They broke labor law.
Buffalo
Like, I don't
area
even know what he's
stores in
arguing.
November 2021, just days before area union elections, in order for Starbucks employees to listen to you give a speech on why they should vote against forming a union, a meeting the NLRB has determined was a violation of the law.
I think this is another area that I hope I get a chance to speak about. For the last 12 months, my involvement, my engagement, and my return to Starbucks has been primarily, I would say 95%, focused on the operations of our business, the customer, domestically and around the world. My involvement and engagement in union activities, despite this event today, has been de minimis. I was not involved in any issue of closing stores.
Are you aware, Mr. Schultz, that an administrative law judge ordered you to record and distribute a video of yourself reading a notice to Starbucks employees about their rights under the National Labor Relations Act, how Starbucks violated those rights, and to assure that Starbucks will not infringe upon those rights in the future, and that this notice must be posted in all Starbucks stores and shared digitally to all of Starbucks employees? Are you prepared to read that notice?
No, I am not, because Starbucks Coffee Company did not break the law.
Under your leadership, Starbucks
What's the
has
recourse for
repeatedly
this? If you don't
refused to
do what
bargain
they tell you to do?
with any of the 7,000 workers in nearly 300 stores where workers have voted to represent themselves through a union. The first group of workers to win their election have been waiting more than 460 days to reach a first contract. Mr. Schultz, will you commit right now that within 14 days of this hearing, Starbucks will exchange proposals with the union, something it has refused to do for more than 450 days, so that meaningful progress can be made to bargain a first contract in good faith? Will you make that commitment?
There's no way.
Because the arrangement that was made by the union and the NLRB in Buffalo to negotiate one single store at a time, we have met over 85 times for a single store. We've tried to arrange over 350 separate meetings. We've said publicly, and I say it here again, that we believe that face-to-face negotiations is the way to proceed. And the reason I want to make that point is that there have been safety issues in which Starbucks managers have been outed on social media. There are privacy issues. We don't want to do it on Zoom. We are prepared to meet face-to-face on a single store issue.
Will you make a promise to this committee that
not
you will
going to.
exchange proposals with the union so that we can begin to make meaningful progress?
On a single store basis, we will continue to negotiate in good faith. That's what we'll do.
Good faith, my ass.
Senator Cassidy.
I defer to Senator Paul.
Oh, great. Jesus
Ayn
Christ.
Rand's Howard Roark points out the ingratitude.
Ivermectin. Did you understand ivermectin is actually really good for COVID?
Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make
Why
fire.
did Fauci do this with China?
He was probably burnt at the stake he taught the others to light. But he left them a gift that had not been conceived, and he lifted darkness from the face of the earth. Now, Starbucks didn't exactly discover fire, but Starbucks did somehow, somewhere, discover in the depths of man's soul that he would pay as much for a double mocha latte as he once did for a week's worth of coffee.
Look at these soy boys in their...
My wife Kelly and I tried to get my grandparents some fancy
lattes.
coffee once, and my grandfather, a survivor of the Depression, informed us in no uncertain terms that he drank Maxwell House. $3.99 for a week's worth of coffee.
Oh, God.
The Pauls, although German, often missed the zeitgeist of the times, and so while we continue to purchase Maxwell House, others, our contemporaries, bought Starbucks stock and did much better than we did. Who knew people would pay $6 for a cup of coffee? But I digress. Convincing the public to buy very expensive coffee is not the discovery of fire, but still it deserves respect. Instead, Congress convenes today not to praise Starbucks, but to bury them. The hearing today is convened to attack a private company for its success, when its success has benefited both customers and its employees alike. We've heard of the average wages,
Just to be
over
clear,
$17.
this is why this is happening.
We've heard of the 401k plans. We've heard of the parental leave, even for part-time employees.
This is why.
Starbucks giving away tens of millions of dollars each year. They have 100% tuition and fee for a bachelor's degree. Maybe it doesn't sound like too bad a place to work. Starbucks is among the most charitable companies in the country. Since 2016, they've had a program to give away unused food to feed over 5 million hungry families.
Wow,
Starbucks didn't
unused
do all
food.
this
How
under
kind of
orders
them.
From a government bureau. They
What
did it
big
because
hearts they
capitalism
have.
works.
This food no one wanted.
We have
That's
more
going
charity
stale.
when we
Here
have
you go.
more money,
Eat this
when
shit.
we have more success, when we have more profit.
Come on.
Nobody buys $6 coffee in impoverished nations. We're an extraordinarily rich nation.
You're homeless. You eat anything.
Marion
Eat this
Tupy
old
and
scone.
Gail Pooley wrote a book called Superabundance. They say we live in an era of superabundance. Starbucks can only exist in an era of superabundance. The average calorie count since when I was born was about 2,800. It's gone up to 3,700. Many would argue you have too much food. You can buy 7 times as much food for the same amount of worker hours. If you measure stuff in time prices, how many hours of the average worker it takes to buy something, it's extraordinary how wealthy we are. Even in inflation-adjusted terms.
Who's wealthy exactly?
1960 to today, 1950 to today, the average income, inflation-adjusted, is up 4-fold. These are all extraordinary tales. This is also an extraordinary tale of a company that started out of nothing and employs tens of thousands of people, all making great wages, and we're here to say as if this is like, Charles Dickens. I mean, we think it's 1812. I mean, it's an amazing success story we live in, the era of superabundance. In
For who?
1820, 96% of people lived
What is this
on less than
argument?
$2 a day. Adjusted
Yeah, I
for
gotta bring this
inflation,
up.
you know how much of the world lives that way? Less than 10%. Trade, capitalism, profit. People all the time are talking about, we want sustainable this and sustainable that. You know what's sustainable? Capitalism and profit and employment. You want to put all the Starbucks workers in the government dole? You want to have a government coffee company? What are we talking about here? If you don't want their coffee, be
We're
like my
talking
family
about
and buy
union
Maxwell
busting is what we're
House.
talking about.
But for goodness sakes, don't deride one of the great
What a
American
cloud.
success stories. This is not who we are. We are better than this. If the goal is to
Union
destroy
membership
the
declines,
goose that laid
income
the
inequality
golden egg,
increases.
then
This
by
is
all
fact.
means, this hearing is a good beginning.
And that's
me,
for
I see
everyone.
the fabulous success of Starbucks, and I understand that luxury,
I'll get back to this
the
in a minute.
luxury to spend an extraordinary amount of money for a cup of coffee is a testament to capitalism. It's a testament to the fact that we have enough money that we can do that.
Why is my alert box not working?
When I walk in Starbucks, I don't see billionaires buying coffee. I see everyone from top to bottom in there paying for the coffee because they've decided the quality is worth it. But I don't want to be part of any witch hunt that vilifies any American business. So count me out. Count me as one who is ecstatic that Starbucks is an American success story, and I'll have no part in trashing their success.
The chat will come
Thank you.
back. There's some weirdness going on.
Senator Hickenlooper, you have to preside soon, so
reset it.
you ask the first questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member. And Mr. Schultz, I appreciate you coming before us, and I realize that you've spent your life creating one of the most successful brands in American history.
At least it should come
You
back.
mentioned the long-held aspiration to make Starbucks a company that balances profitability with social conscience. And I think that brand is exceedingly attractive, especially to young people, and I think it's part of your success. I think in many ways, the ability of Starbucks to attract young workers and have them believe in the brand and the vision is a big part of that success, which I think is part of what this group believes is that the partnership between the company and the workers is a key to success for any successful company. Many folks who work at Starbucks came because they wanted a chance to work for a company that prioritizes earnings and benefits, wellness, and your testimony described in some detail that you're near the top of that ladder. But we also heard over the last few weeks from other workers, some from Colorado, who told us they came to work for the partner-centric model but were disappointed because they wanted that opportunity to be part of a union, and told us that disillusionment has been very hard for them. So I guess the question I would ask first is that appearance that so many of the employees have of that their organizing efforts are being interfered with seems at odds with the commitment to the partner model and the worker welfare. So how do you respond to those workers who appreciate the Starbucks model but would like to be able to organize with less confrontation?
Well, thank you for the question and the opportunity to answer that, without some of the propaganda that has been floating around.
Oh, fuck off.
I've built my life trying to create a company that values every single person with dignity and respect who puts on the green apron. That has not changed as a result of 1%, 3,400 people out of 250,000 who want to join the union. We've said it publicly, we respect the law, we respect their right, and we want to treat everyone with respect and dignity. However, I have the right, and the company has the right to have a preference. And our preference is to maintain the direct relationship we've had with our employees who we call partners. And we have a track record that demonstrates the values that we have shown.
Your preference
and the
does
value
not
that we have created.
Go over.
But we maintain
cannot go
a level
over
of
what the
respect
law
for
says.
everyone who
what
wears the
labor
green
law
apron.
states.
Thank you.
Labor has a preference, and they voted.
There's been considerable questions
above you
about the shrinking middle class.
That's the end of it.
This is. I'm not asking you to be an economist in this sense, although you clearly know more about economics than I will ever know. But when you look at the charts, and we've got a chart behind me that demonstrates that
look at that.
as
Is that the same one?
the middle class has shrunken and as income inequality has increased
Hickenlooper.
dramatically, it has directly
Hickenlooper.
coincided with the decline in unions. And I certainly respect
Who would have thought Hickenlooper would have
the
this?
desire to be directly connected with all your employees. But in many ways, that right to organize and that opportunity for people to be part of a union is a crucial building block for the middle class that I think gave this country stability that we don't see in the same way that we used to. At its core, I think union organizing is about having a greater say in their workplace. And I think everybody always wants that. Some of the studies show that entrepreneurs start new businesses not necessarily to make money, but to have someone bossing them around. So what do you say to the workers who want to join together with their peers to unionize their workplaces, despite however great Starbucks has been for them?
I've said before, and I want to repeat it, I think unions have served an important role in American business for many years. And if you look at the 50s and the 60s, unions generally were working on behalf of people in a company where those people have not been treated fairly, where there's been in some cases, nefarious acts by the employer taking advantage of the employee. I can only say in my own company, based on the track record that we've had, we do not believe, and it's our preference, that we are that kind of company.
Okay, but that's not how labor law works.
We treat our people fairly.
Like, this doesn't matter what
We
your
do
preference
nothing
is.
that
This
is
ridiculous.
nefarious. We put our people first. We make decisions based on our people, and we have the track record to prove it. Starbucks is probably one of the best, if not the best, first job in America. As I said in my opening statement, 65% of baristas are now managers. I walked into a store an hour ago, just at 24th and M, just walked in, was met by a guy named Nico, never met him before. 22 years with Starbucks, and he tells me his story. He came from Senegal. He's an American citizen, started as a barista, became a manager, district manager. And the thing that he wanted me to know, this is an hour ago, is I bought a house and I have a car and I raised 2 kids because of beanstalk at Starbucks. Now, you put that overall, in the last 15, 20 years, over $2 billion of equity because of beanstalk, 14% of people's
Senator
base
Hickenlooper,
pay.
your time has expired.
But it's an important point, $2 billion of equity because of everyone being an owner.
Senator
It's gone
Cassidy.
back to our employees. It's unprecedented. And that's why Starbucks doesn't need a union.
That's not.
Senator Cassidy.
That's not how this shit works, bro.
Mr. Chairman, I will respectfully notice that you took 7 minutes on
That's
yours.
not
so
how
Mr.
labor
Schultz
law
should have been
works.
allowed to finish his statement.
Mr. Schultz
It's
will
not
have
based
as
on
much
what the
time
owner
as he needs
thinks.
to respond to the questions
So
of 15
ridiculous.
people. Senator Cassidy.
I defer to Senator Romney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Cassidy. I recognize at the outset there's some irony to a non-coffee drinking Mormon conservative defending a Democrat candidate for president in perhaps one of the most liberal companies in America. That being said, I
Romney's one of
also
the worst.
think it's
Watch.
somewhat rich
This will be unhinged.
that you're being grilled by people who have never had the opportunity to create a single job. And yet they believe
What'd I
that
tell
they
you?
know better how to do so and what's best for the American worker and what's best for the American economy, what's best for growth. I also think it's rich to not recognize the extraordinary conflict of interest we have, which is our Democrat colleagues overwhelmingly get their campaign funds from unions and therefore would like to find every possible way to extend unions, even if an enterprise feels that it's in their best interest.
Do you want to compare
pursue a different
money
course.
from corporations and
Now, I know
billionaires
that
to
there
what
are a number
unions
of reasons
give?
why you might
Please,
wish
please
not
do.
to have union organization in your
Out of
various
your fucking
enterprises.
mind.
At the same time, I agree with Senator Cassidy and with your own comments, Mr. Schultz, which is that people have a legal right to form a union. There are some employers that are not good employers, and a union is necessary to protect the rights of those individuals, and that if any enterprise, including yours, has broken the law, that it should be held accountable for having done so. At the same time, there are legitimate reasons why an enterprise might choose not to become unionized. I first would note that within your company, there are probably some stores that are union, some that are non-union. Do the non-union store employees get paid less than the union store employees?
The starting wage has been the same. The only difference is the benefits that we created in May. And my understanding under the law is that we were not allowed to provide those benefits to people who are organizing to join a union.
And so, in fact, that non-union stores are actually a little better total package than the union stores. Let me ask another question, or just make another point, and that is, I would understand why you would not want to have an adversarial relationship between the store manager and the employees that work there. I'd also understand that sometimes in some union enterprises, there are work rules that prevent someone from going from let's say, a barista to becoming a manager. And you've indicated that, if you will, career opportunities for people are enhanced when they're able to move from position to position and become a manager. Is that a concern of yours?
No, I mean, can I tell one story?
Please.
If I can? And it happens to be in the state of Vermont. And I think this is indicative of the situation that we are currently experiencing. There's 7 stores in the state of Vermont that Starbucks has. Of the 7, one of them voted to join a union. This is important fact. 21 Starbucks people, partners, work in that store. How many people do you think voted to either become a union or not a union? Take a guess.
Got me. I would presume the
Well, I
majority.
think when you hear the number, you'll understand the problem. 21 people in the store, 6 people voted. 6. 4 voted to become a union, and 2 voted for not. Now, I'm not saying why the other people didn't vote. That's up to the committee to decide. But you can imagine there's issues going on in a store like that where people work close together.
They're pressured not to vote.
Do one
That's
thing
that's
versus
the
other.
reality.
But here's the
because
problem.
they're worried about how
Since that store,
if they may be
since
fired,
6
as
people
others have
voted
been fired
to
for
the
wanting to
union,
unionize.
of the 7 stores in Vermont, this particular store has twice the level of attrition, and the majority of the people have left the store. And the tension that exists in any store that Starbucks has, since it's individual stores voting, in a small group of people, there is lots of issues that we are dealing with, and overall, in the stores that have voted for union, about 300 are twice the level of attrition that we currently have in the 99% of stores that have not voted for union. But the Vermont thing is not a proxy. The Vermont thing is exactly what's going on around the country.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective, and would just turn to one other point, which is we talk about corporate greed all the time as if it's something brand new. Of course, profit incentive and greed has been there from the beginning of humankind. But there's also union greed. Greed exists throughout our society through various enterprises. But let me ask, your company's highly profitable. It was profitable, I presume, very early on, became profitable as time went on. Where does all that profit go? Does it go to all pay you and the senior executives? Where does the profit go of an enterprise?
Yes,
Did it all
does.
go out in dividends or stock buybacks? Where has your profit gone over the history of your company?
The majority of profits that Starbucks has made has gone back into infrastructure, roasting plants, $800,000 to $1 million to build a store. The profits of the company have gone back to the business. Now, what's most important
while you were growing
is when
it.
we create shareholder value,
How about
as
now?
we have for Starbucks through the years. Our employees, our partners, are sharing our shared success model in that profit because everyone has been an owner. And the first day that I came back, April 4th, 2022, the first day, what did I do? The one thing that would get shareholders across the country who own Starbucks stock angry with Howard Schultz, and that is I stopped our buyback program on the first day. Our stock went down. I was not concerned about that, and I took that money and I invested it right back into our people, which resulted in higher wages 1 month after I came back. Now, that is the only evidence I have, which is the fact
And you crushed unions.
that my operating style, which has been 40 years,
None of this
is to build
excuses
a company that
breaking labor
balances
law.
profitability
We're getting away
with
from
a
the
level
topic
of
here.
shared
Come on,
success
Bernie.
for our people.
Get the
And
shit
we have
back on
the
track.
evidence to prove it, sir.
This is
Senator
ridiculous.
Murray.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, for coming before the committee. I appreciate it. I've listened carefully, and throughout your testimony, you've made it very clear that Starbucks prefers its workers not to be unionized. But I think you know that decision is up to workers under federal law. I just have been disappointed, I have to tell you, from a number of my constituents I've been hearing from about some of the widespread anti-union efforts at Starbucks, including in Washington State, where the NLRB has certified 19 elections, as you know, at Starbucks stores. They have issued 71 complaints covering 31 unfair labor practice charges, and NLRB judges have issued 2 decisions now finding that Starbucks violated federal law. So let me just ask you a simple question. Do you agree that it is workers who get to decide whether they want a union?
Senator Murray, I agree that the person at Starbucks has the right under the law to decide whether or not they want to join a union, and Starbucks Coffee Company also has the legal right to provide a vision for our employees, which currently represent 99% of the 250,000 who wear the green apron, that our vision is a preference to maintain our direct relationship. And in terms of what you said, as I said to Chairman Sanders, those are allegations, and Starbucks Coffee Company unequivocally has not broken the law.
Let me just share with you.
Judges
I heard you answer
found
Senator
Starbucks
Hickenlooper
broke the
with
law
treating
130
your, employees
times.
with dignity and respect,
Yes.
which I appreciate. But I am hearing from a number of folks really troubling reports about Starbucks refusing to allow credit card tipping, cutting employee hours, holding the loss of critical benefits like health care, insurance and gender-affirming care over the heads of employees who are trying to exercise their rights.
Which is why a lot of them don't
I've even heard
vote.
reports, so you know, about
'Cause they're afraid.
uncertainty for union employees about whether or not they would receive abortion travel benefits, which all your workers receive. I'm concerned when I hear from my constituents about unfair threats of any kind or denying benefits unfairly, even when the union agrees to waive its right to bargain. I would assume you would agree that that doesn't constitute treating someone with dignity or respect if they are being threatened.
Senator Murray, you and I have known each other for quite a while, you being the senator of our home state. I think you have many times actually talked about Starbucks as a model employer in many of the
Look at this. He's trying to
meetings that you've had.
He's trying to avoid answering this question.
I do take offense, I have to admit, because it's quite personal when you bring up things that you've heard that are not true. We have never, ever taken any benefit away, and we never would, of anyone who was interested in joining a union. We simply have said that under the law, our understanding is we did not have the right to provide incremental benefits during the bargaining process. But Howard Schultz,
which is
the
not
leadership
true.
team of Starbucks, the board of directors, some of whom are here today, would never take benefits away of any kind of someone who was involved in trying to join a union.
Well, thank you for the answer. I'm giving you the question, so you have a right to respond. That's why I'm asking. But you should know that those are some of the things that I hear, and I wanted to hear your response.
Okay.
And I've also heard allegations that Starbucks has interfered with employees' ability to testify, including in Seattle, where an administrative law judge found that Starbucks did that. Can you respond to that charge?
I have no knowledge of that, Senator Murray.
Oh, really? No knowledge?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
God.
Senator Cassidy.
I defer to Senator Tuberville.
These disgusting
Thank you,
individuals.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cassidy.
Trying to be as nice as possible.
Ms. Schultz,
Disgusting
thank you for
individual.
being here. Thank you. I know
It could be a lot harsher.
this is pretty tough at times, but it's good to hear your side of the story. I came from the coaching profession. For years, I talked to young kids every year at the beginning of the year about they all wanted and needed something. I always told them one thing. Only thing you get from me and from this country is an opportunity. And you took that opportunity and ran with it. And you've got a lot of people that work for you over the years and work for your company and their company and made something out of themselves. So thank you for that. You've been a huge idol for this country in terms of what you've done. We've heard a lot about what you give to your employees, health care and all that. I fully support unions. If people want to join a union, that's fine. I think that's what this country is about. Sounds like Starbucks employees as a whole, what we've heard so far, have had a great working environment. I understand collective bargaining processes have ongoing with almost 300 individual stores, and you have to negotiate with each one of these individuals in each store, each individual, not each store. And I know that there have been difficulties in trying to navigate these individual negotiations. I'm sure obstacles have come up that are unique to each store. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you. You want to be respectful, as we all do, of requests of any employee, and you want to make sure that every person or group that you deal with feels that their rights are being respected and their voices heard. This could even include employees with specific rights and protections in workplace. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I know this has been a long process that requires considerable effort on your side to do all this. So can you speak to me about the difficulties that you've been having in bargaining processes, specifically in the unique issues that your average person might not understand?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. When Buffalo first emerged, and there was a process to try and decide whether or not we were going to negotiate per individual store or by district or region, it was the position of the union to have it one store at a time. That created significant complications and obstacles in the collective bargaining process. We now have to be put in a position to negotiate individual store, one by one, across the country, and set up individual meetings. Now, because in this process, Starbucks managers and district managers have had safety issues in which the union
Yeah, it was so
union
hard that you had
organizers
individual
have been at
meetings
their
to pressure
home.
them not to
They
unionize.
have been outed on social media that have been
This is
significant
all just
challenges
bullshit.
for our people to maintain their personal safety. We have said we do not want these meetings to be anything but face-to-face, so we know who's in the room. We don't know if there's a Zoom meeting of who is taping the meeting, who's in the background, and who is looking in on the meeting, and whether or not they are part of the company, part of the union, or whatever. And so we have asked respectfully, we will show up as we have 85 separate times in a face-to-face meeting, and we've tried to set up over 365 meetings. It is a very difficult scheduling issue and very difficult logistics issue. And we should not be held accountable for not showing up when all we're asking for is face-to-face bargaining.
This is such bullshit.
Thank you. I'd like to hear your story about your employee, if you'd tell. You got about a minute and a half.
About
the employee.
How many
that
meetings
you
do you think
had the
Starbucks has
discussion
on a daily basis?
this morning?
This is a
that
massive
you had
company.
an argument about, and you might want to
Oh,
go
okay.
somewhere
Thank
else
you for that.
Yeah.
When I came back to Starbucks,
Net revenue $26 billion in 2022. They can't hold 300 meetings.
Collaborative meetings across the country to understand from our employees
they're
what they
pretending
were
they're a small
experiencing
company.
and the challenges of a post-COVID
so absurd.
environment on their life at home, on their work life, work balance, et cetera. Those meetings were not about union negotiations. In fact, we made it clear we're not here to talk about the union, we're here to talk about Starbucks. In a meeting in Long Beach, a Starbucks partner was trying to interrupt the meeting and start talking about the union. She happened to be sitting next to me. I didn't know she was recording it. I didn't know she was filming it, but it was clear that there was a disruptive mentality. I just turned to her and I said, if you don't like the company, if you hate the company, you could work somewhere else. It was not a threat. And going back to Chairman Sanders' question before, I can understand she may have misinterpreted what I said. It wasn't a threat. I didn't know I was being filmed. I just simply said, if you hate the company, you could go work somewhere else. Those 100 sessions that I attended are based on what we've done to improve the company, to understand the empathy and compassion we need to have for our people in a post-COVID environment. They were not union meetings. They were meetings to discuss Starbucks and the opportunity for our people. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much, and thanks for calling the hearing. Mr. Schultz, welcome, and I want to welcome the workers in this room who have had to do so much, expend so much effort over many years to have the right to organize and bargain collectively, so we stand with you in that effort. I think that's a right that every single worker in the United States of America should have, the right to bargain collectively, to organize for wages and benefits. And too often in our country, workers don't have that right. I represent a state where workers over generations marched and mobilized and literally bled and died for the right to organize. It wasn't conferred upon them by some CEO or some boss. They had to fight for it, and that resulted, of course, in the National Labor Relations Act, which is still in effect, still the law of the land, despite repeated corporate attempts to undermine it. So we have a lot to talk about, not just with regard to Starbucks, but for workers generally. I wanted to start, Mr. Schultz, with a discussion about one of the firms that Starbucks hired. I'm told that during your tenure as CEO, you hired Littler Mendelson, one of the largest and most notorious union-busting firms in the country, that reportedly charges upwards of $600 an hour for their services. It's been reported that in 2021, Starbucks shut down all stores in the Buffalo area, rented out the Hyatt Regency Hotel, flew you, Mr. Schultz, and Starbucks senior executives into town and forced workers to hear you give anti-union talking points. While Starbucks refuses to say how much they've spent on anti-union efforts, it's clear the company is willing to spend a significant amount of money on union-busting tactics. And guess what? Under current law, federal law, Internal Revenue Service law, Starbucks is able to write off those costs as a run-of-the-mill business expense, meaning taxpayers are subsidizing union busting in the United States of America including that of Starbucks. So, Mr. Schultz, I'd ask you, as a private citizen, in your personal capacity, do you believe that corporations should have the right to get a tax break, a taxpayer-provided subsidization, a tax break for union-busting activities?
Senator Casey, you've said a number of things I'd like to respond to, but...
Well, just answer that question first.
No, I will. I mean, Starbucks Coffee Company is following the tax laws and the law that Congress has
I didn't
set
ask
up.
you about Starbucks. I asked you about your personal view.
Yeah.
Do you think that provision should stay as the law or should be changed?
My personal view is we should follow the law that Congress has set up.
Come on.
Do you support that?
What a cop-out.
I support the law.
You support the provision that allows a company to hire union-busting firms and conduct other activity that interferes with the rights of workers to organize. I understand it's the law, but you're saying you support it. You would not
This is
support
good.
change.
This is good
that
questioning.
correct?
I support the law, and I also take offense with you categorizing me or Starbucks as a union buster when that is not
woe is you.
true.
Well, look, you go to just March of this year. Administrative law judge issued a 218-page decision finding, quote, egregious and widespread misconduct demonstrating a general disregard for the employee's fundamental rights, unquote, in Buffalo, New York. So I think there's plenty of evidence on the record in terms of what the National Labor Relations Board has set forth in their opinions and their work. Let me ask you another question before my time has expired. There have been complaints, and I want you to answer this if you know anything about it, that Starbucks is spying on its workers as they try to organize. Again, another National Labor Relations Board administrative law judge recently wrote that Starbucks used headsets to, quote, closely supervise, monitor, and create the impression that employees' union activities are under surveillance. So we've heard about this with regard to other companies. Do you believe, and again, this is in your personal capacity, and you realize where you are now, do you believe that workers should have the basic dignity at work not to be surveilled by their employers?
Senator, I am incredibly proud of how we treat Starbucks partners and have since 1987.
I understand
You're not aware of anyone surveilling anyone at Starbucks.
You're not aware of that?
I am not.
Do you support that?
No, I would not support that.
Thank you, Mr.
Can I come back and just address something you said, if you don't mind? You talked about Buffalo. I just want to clarify. From what I understand, the activities in Buffalo began in August of 21. I was not the CEO at the time. I came back in April of 22. But I want to share with the committee what we have found out about the organizing in Buffalo. And I think this is important for everyone to know. The organizing in Buffalo began with an individual who we later found out was paid for and joined Starbucks as an employee in 2020. And even though we hired her on her own merit, we found out that she was paid for by the very union trying to organize Starbucks.
I'm going to
You paid for union busters. Like what?
That's a good story. We'll come back to that because it sounds like something to do.
I hope you do.
What? Like,
I'll defer to Senator
what is even the
Mark
issue?
Wayne Muller.
Well, thank you. And considering the chairman doesn't want to hear any of that information because I believe he's pretty biased in his opinion already, Mr. Schultz, I'll give you an
Oh, this
opportunity
guy
to
is
finish
the
up.
fucking worst.
Thank you very much.
Total dummy.
So,
Are we getting to him?
as you might imagine, we're very curious to understand what happened in Buffalo.
He has a terrible name, too.
And we later found
We'll
out
get to
that
it.
this individual, which was hired in 2020, was paid for and under
By the
the
way, I'll get to your
employment
super chats when
of
I
the
can.
union that was basically trying to organize
It's
Starbucks.
working.
We later found out there was more than one person. And so you might want to ask yourself, where's the fairness, the objectivity, and the integrity of what we're talking about here today?
No, and I mean, if you're anti-union as a CEO, you're
Mark Wayne Mullen.
Union busting, or you're for union busting. I'm not saying you're anti-union. I'm just saying that it
Mark
seems like to
Wayne
me, as a
Mullen.
former CEO, not nearly at the success.
This guy
that you
inherited
had,
his
sir.
father's
I'm not trying to
business
defend your company,
and pretends
because,
he
quite frankly,
started from
politically, we're on
nothing.
totally different ends of the spectrum. And so
I
the
did a
irony
video
of
on
this
this
hearing is actually
clown.
kind of funny. And I do want to point out some hypocrisy about this hearing with the chairman, and it's not trying to get personal. All this information is going to be very public. But the fact that you can't defend your company because you want to have a good relationship with your employees and you believe in employee value, which we all do. Any CEO knows that the success of our companies are based on our employees. We get that.
Yeah, we say that, and then we don't actually treat them with
But it seems like unions today, all they want to do is fight with their employees or their employer, the same employer that is hiring those team members. And that friction causes a very volatile.
They're hiring because there's a demand, not because you're generous.
Tough
there's a demand for the work.
And if the company and the employees aren't in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, then they can't. Neither one can be successful. And unions themselves, if you're part of a union, you can never be an executive, you can never be a manager, and never be a CEO. And if you can't be an executive or a manager or the CEO, then how are you actually going to implement the changes that the unions want in those positions to begin with? And it seems like they actually hold back their team members. Mm-hmm. But I take offense to the chairman pointing out that all CEOs are corrupt because they're millionaires. You know, if you make a lot of money, you're corrupt. Yet it's bothering to me because, Mr. Chairman, you yourself
that's not even the
have been very successful. Rightfully so. Glad you have. You've been in office for 28 years, and your wife
how you treat. It's how you made that money. What did you do to make the money? How do you treat people?
In fact, your quote on being wealthy and being a millionaire was, well, if you write a bestseller, you can be a millionaire too. If you can be a millionaire, why can't Mr. Schultz and other CEOs be millionaires and be honest too?
They're billionaires.
If that's the
because
case,
they took advantage of people
Mr.
their
Schultz,
entire
who
lives.
actually creates jobs and a bestseller of a book isn't creating any jobs? Why is it that he's corrupt and you're not?
Jobs are created because there's demand.
Corrupt
you
because
fucking
they're
clown.
Wealthy, and yet our chairman, who is wealthy, and I'm glad you are, you're not.
Oh my God. Do you know the difference between someone that has $1 million and $1 billion?
Entrepreneurs,
is this guy that stupid?
For go-getters, for world changers, to be successful in life. The U.S. government is designed for people that want to succeed can. We can go out and achieve anything that we choose to. But when you lean towards socialism, what you think is government is the answer.
How is worker organizing the government?
Are the choice.
How is that the government?
And if you're against
it's worker organizing.
Then you're dead wrong and you must be corrupt. That's not the world we're living in. That's not the America that we believe in. And I'm not against unions. If you want to choose to be in a union, be in a union. But if you choose not to, then you choose not to. And that's why I'm good with right-to-work states. That's honestly why unions actually thrive in Oklahoma, and we're right-to-work states, because it creates a happy environment and a good environment, because employees get to choose what they want to be part of. And the employer can have a say in it.
It completely drains unions of any power.
What is wrong with employees having a choice?
Which then drains the entire society of power. Because unions, the existence of unions benefits everybody.
Is providing good benefits
everybody.
And paying higher than everybody else. But yet, if you're not part of a union, you're also paying starvation wages. What hypocrisy. What bias. Chairman,
these people live in like some other land. It's hard to even.
Education, Labor, and Pension Committee.
Like, you can't take these arguments.
We shouldn't have a biased approach.
Because they're not serious.
Best for America, and all those that want to.
They don't make any sense what they're saying.
And so, while we politically disagree, Mr. Schultz, I applaud you for your success, and I applaud all the CEOs out there for their success, and all the employees that work hard, that's in the same boat, that's making their companies great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let me respond. The senator did mention my name, I think. And I think you got an all-time record here. You've made more misstatements in a shorter period of time than I have ever heard.
Please correct
me. Well, if I'm worth $8 million, excuse me.
It's all public.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right? Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
If I'm worth $8 million, that's good news to me. I'm not aware of it. That's a lie. All right? Number two.
Part of public records.
You're probably looking at some phony right-wing internet stuff. It ain't true.
No.
All right? You should read beyond that. It is not true.
It's part of public records.
No, it is not public record.
Okay. Well, you made
It is not
$1.7 million on your book.
public record.
You made
All right,
1.7
it is-
on your book.
Excuse me. I've got the mic now. Number
Did you not
two,
make the statement
I
that if
have
you want to
the
be a
mic
billionaire?
now. I've got it.
He let
Did
you
not make
talk.
that statement?
He let you
had
talk.
Your time.
Okay.
All right, you're not telling the truth.
fucking
Second
clown.
of all, you got no evidence that I have ever said that all CEOs are corrupt. I have never ever said that.
Probably not all, but
well,
every
then
time you talk
probably
Oh
about
my
CEOs,
God,
you
this is
do
not a
say that.
debate,
Say it.
moron.
Furthermore, what this hearing is about is whether or not you talk about being pro-union. Really, what this hearing is about is whether workers have the constitutional right to form a union. The evidence is overwhelming, not from me, but from the National Labor Relations Board, is that time after time after time, despite what Mr. Schultz is saying, Starbucks has broken the law and has prevented workers from joining unions to collectively bargain for decent wages and benefits. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Look
Schultz,
at this
I
clown.
want
He knows he's full of
by
shit. He knows it.
acknowledging the leadership role your company has played in
Privileged little
providing
bitch.
benefits to workers. You talked about it in your testimony with great pride, comprehensive health benefits to full and part-time employees starting in 1988, and stock awards to all employees since 1991. You noted, I think, that these benefits allow you to attract and retain a workforce that you call the secret sauce of the Starbucks success. Given this history, though, it is all the more puzzling to me that you're fighting this union drive so fiercely. You've said that a union will sever the direct relationship you have with employees, which you call crucial to anticipating their needs. Instead of leaving it up to your anticipation, a union can ensure that you receive clear feedback about what your workers actually need, free from fear of retaliation. While you call them partners, your workers are limited in their ability to engage with you directly because there's a power differential, and you have power over them and the benefits that they cherish. A power you have shown your willingness to wield, involving employees attempting to organize. I find it particularly ironic, especially given your own powerful story, that you don't see this power dynamic. Further, I think this number is right for your U.S. employee base, but you employ over 235,000 people, in over 3,000 in my home state of Wisconsin alone. You can't possibly have a direct relationship with all of them. Some intermediary is necessary. If you truly want a direct relationship with your workforce, I would suggest to you that a union can provide that. I also want to note in your written testimony that you returned to Starbucks in April of last year and noted that the company had gone astray, had lost its way on many levels. You talked about short-termism, an issue on which I agree profoundly. And who were these partners to turn to with this direct relationship during this time that the company had gone astray? In Wisconsin, when I met with Starbucks union organizers, it was immediately clear to me that they take significant pride in their work. You talked a little back and forth about the quote of hating Starbucks so much, why don't you quit or get a job somewhere else? These workers don't want to quit. They want to work. In fact, they seem to share so many of the same goals for the company that you've laid out so eloquently in your testimony. All of these workers are asking is that you respect their right to organize, which would require you to treat them not just as partners, but as equals. It's that power dynamic that I was talking about. So on that note, Mr. Schultz, it has been almost 1 year since the first Wisconsin store voted to unionize. I want to ask you on the record when Starbucks will begin bargaining in earnest with those workers, and when can I expect that I'll hear that the first contract has been signed?
I'd love to answer your question. I wonder if I can have more time to respond to some of the things you've said. But we are prepared in the state of Wisconsin and other states that we have partners who want to join a union to meet face-to-face, as we've stated consistently, and begin a bargaining process. And we're prepared to do that in Wisconsin. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I could just speak to a few things that the senator had mentioned.
You have about 50 seconds.
Okay. Starbucks has had almost 5 million people wear the green apron. 5 million. So we've created close to 5 million jobs. 5 million jobs.
Let's dispel this idea.
Just think about it.
You didn't
How
create
many
the jobs.
families
There's a
have
demand.
benefited
If
from
there's a
Starbucks?
demand and you fill it, you didn't
The
create that.
majority of those partners
That
have
job is there
participated
because there's a demand
in an
for it.
equity plan,
This idea that they're job
unprecedented
creators is so
American business.
ridiculous.
14% of their base pay is how we
The job
started.
wouldn't exist if there was no demand for the job.
In addition to that, 99% of the 350,000 who work for Starbucks want a direct relationship with the company. In addition to that, what's the most important metric of any business? And that is trust with your people. And as a result of that,
I'm sorry.
we have the highest level of retention of any company in our sector. That's hundreds of companies. The highest level of retention.
Mr. Schultz, there are time limits here. Senator Cassidy?
I defer to Senator Brown.
Yeah, he never answered the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member. I think this is an interesting discussion because I recently come from the world of building a business over 37 years.
Oh, God.
And I've been clear when it comes to unions, they are so important in today's world, vis-a-vis large public companies, multinationals. How would you have any countervailing clout unless you didn't have an effective union? I think this is interesting because the restaurant business, I think currently has maybe 3 to 4% of it unionized. And one of the reasons, since I had a small business for 17 years, 15 employees, before it grew. And the best avoidance of a union is to treat your employees like family, pay good wages, have good benefits. You do that, you're probably never going to have a union knocking at your door. But we're talking about an industry here that through COVID went through one of the most traumatic events any small enterprise or business has gone through. This is not a small enterprise or business, but it's in a business. It's got a high fatality rate due to the nature of it. I don't know currently what you're paying your average employee on the line. That's going to be the first question, and then what the average pay of senior, middle management, senior management would be. I always thought it was good, as long as you're earning equity in whatever you're doing, that you probably be reasonable there. Don't pull in with a Maserati and all of that. I'd love to know where you're at on that wage stratification first.
Thank you, Senator. The average wage is $17.50. That's higher than the minimum wage of every state in America. With benefits, and the majority of our people
How do you
take the
compare an
benefits,
average to a
that's
minimum wage?
$27
That doesn't make
an
any
hour.
sense.
65% of our managers across the country were baristas, and all in, the manager's salary is about $80,000.
Very good. And then do you have a stratum of management above that?
Is a district manager, regional manager, and I think what we're most proud of is that the majority of people who are managing stores, managing districts, managing regions, started out in our stores. We have hundreds, maybe thousands, of beautiful stories that our partners have shared with us about what Starbucks has done for them and their families as a result.
Our partners who are not actually partners because we won't allow them to unionize when they vote to form a union, but we call them partners because it
And I
sounds
think that's
good.
important to note. But I think what you represent here is a watershed case because you're large. You generally get large because you're successful along the way. And we've got to be careful because I'm going to pivot to something the other side of the aisle has proposed is like the PRO Act. And again, I'm probably the most outspoken Republican on the benefit of unions. But
even I don't support the PRO Act.
Where they go.
This is the same. This is like the Jimmy Dore
into
angle.
the gig
I'm so
economy,
far left, but even I don't support this.
Into the independent contractors, which is the next chapter on some of this. That will stifle entrepreneurialism. When you look at if you are large, you shouldn't necessarily be held to account unless there are things that you're doing to impede the law in terms of unionizing. You've already made that point that you don't think you've been doing it. All I'm saying, this is important because this will have a ripple effect way beyond your business. And the one thing we can't have is to suffocate what's made this country great, and that is that you do not necessarily have to wrestle with a union if you do all the things that are good for your employees to begin with.
This is a wrong way to look at it.
Can you honestly say that you've done that throughout the history of your company, and that I know you have mobility. It sounds like several different ways you can grow. You have no mobility unless you're growing as a company, but have you honestly done that?
Yes, we have, sir, and I wonder if I could just give you one prime example that I think the committee should understand. You know, during COVID, as you said, the restaurant industry was really plummeted. I mean, we had it very, very tough. We had thousands of Starbucks stores closed. Many of our peers started cutting benefits during COVID. Starbucks did not cut one benefit during COVID, and we paid every single partner during COVID with no exception.
What was your average wage before COVID? Because you said you're at about $17 now starting. Did you have to raise it over the last couple of years?
We raised wages in May. That's correct.
And what was it before?
About $15 an hour. We went to $17.
And one final point. Even $17 an hour, that's not a living wage in this day and age. I'm proud that in our company, we pay the highest starting wage in a low unemployment county. In any large corporation, shouldn't necessarily be bragging about $15 to $20 wages. When you look at the typical structure of a large company, that should probably be $20
This is
plus,
a Republican
like
thing.
many Main Street businesses pay. And I think if companies like yours and the larger companies don't do it, you're going to be constantly, grappling with maybe here. But on the other hand, unions shouldn't be trying to get involved in companies that are doing a good job, especially Main Street and smaller ones. I wish we had more time.
Unions are about having
Thank you, sir.
a say over your work life.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It doesn't necessarily have
Good
to do with
afternoon.
how much
Good
you're being
morning.
paid
I'm
or
Rita
even
Still.
like working conditions.
Mr.
It's about being
Schultz,
able to
you
have a say
repeatedly call your
in
employees
in where you spend
partners.
most of your time.
Do you value your employees or your partners that want to join a union or have joined a union? Do you value them as much as you value those that have not yet joined a union?
We have respect for every single partner who wears a green apron, regardless of their choice to go for a union.
So yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with some unionized Starbucks workers from Minnesota, Gracie and Elizabeth, and they tell me that Starbucks is cutting their weekly hours. They estimate that they're losing $4 an hour in wages because the company won't allow them in unionized stores to access credit card tipping when that's available to workers in non-unionized shops. And they tell me that they are simultaneously understaffed in their stores and unable to get enough hours to pay their bills. If these folks are your partners, why are you treating them differently than the non-unionized workers?
When we raised wages in May, my understanding was that under the law, we did not have the unilateral right to provide those benefits to partners who were involved in collective bargaining. And that is why.
So you have said that several times during this meeting. You've said that you cannot legally provide these benefits without bargaining over them. But you know, I'm sure, that the union has specifically stated in this letter, July 15th, 2022, that they waived any objection to bargaining on this. It says in the letter, to this end, the union hereby waives any objection that we might have to Starbucks providing union-represented employees with any wage or benefit improvements provided to unrepresented employees. So I don't think this, I just think you're wrong.
Oh, let me try and explain. There are an array of wages and benefits that need to be negotiated in the collective bargaining process. It would not be proper to take one piece of the puzzle out of the negotiating process, since the people who have joined the union have decided that they want to negotiate a contract.
Well, that's not what the law says.
It's our preference and our right to negotiate that contract fairly
This
and
idea that what he
objectively,
thinks
but
is
not in
proper
piecemeal.
is somehow that's what he should go by, as opposed to, I don't know what the law
I think that the way the law
states.
reads is that there is an exception to that requirement to negotiate when the employees make a clear and unmistakable waiver to bargaining. But let me ask you about this, because the first Minnesota store union was certified over 320 days ago, and no meaningful bargaining has happened since then, though there have been some meetings. Do you know how long those meetings have been in Minnesota?
I'm not involved in any of the meetings.
So the Minnesota folks tell me that those negotiation sessions have not lasted longer than 6 minutes. So that seems to me, sir, as a failure to negotiate in good faith.
From my understanding, in many of the meetings that we've showed up to have face-to-face meetings, the other side has decided to put on a Zoom or a Teams, and then we decide, and we've told them up front, that we will not negotiate unless the meeting is in person and we know who's in the room. And so we have left
Because
those
you're afraid of what you're going to
as a
say.
result of the fact
Why else
that we
would you
could
be
not
afraid of
preserve
that?
the privacy and the integrity of a face-to-face meeting.
But it's about the
So-
workers.
My observation here is that this feels like sort of a catch-22, because you are not willing to bargain on issues like credit card tipping, while we are simultaneously, you're not coming together to bargain at all. And so I think that that is why the employees are feeling, who are wanting to be in a union, that feel so frustrated. But I want to just touch on one other thing. I've been listening really closely to you today, and I also come from the private sector, had my own company at one time before I moved into the public sector, and I've been really struck by your focus on what an excellent company you are. And honestly, it sounds as if you are personally offended or even insulted that anyone would question you or your company. And it seems as if you feel that only bad companies should be unionized, that there's something nefarious about a company that is done something bad and therefore they need to be unionized, and that Starbucks doesn't need a union because you are a good company. But I think, Mr. Schultz, that is not your decision to make.
Thank you.
And I believe that there is an inherent value in coming together to organize that would address this imbalance of power that I think the many, many Starbucks
Senator, you're
partners
right.
sitting behind you and in Minnesota feel. I mean, you're a billionaire, and they are your employees. The imbalance of power is extreme, and that is why people want to come together to form a union.
Senator, I agree with you that I do not have the right to decide who can vote for a union or not. But I am the chairman, I am the CEO of the company, or I was the CEO of the company, and I have the preference and the right to communicate to our people about what it is we believe is right for Starbucks. And I want to repeat, 99% of the 250,000 want a direct relationship with the company. The last thing you said,
You
and
can
it's
make
been
that
said
argument.
many
You
times
still
by the
lost
chairman, I just want to
votes
make a point of
in,
that. This
300
monarch
stores?
billionaire, let's just get at that, okay? I grew up in federally subsidized housing. Let me finish. I grew up in federally subsidized housing.
And now you're a
My
piece
parents
of shit.
never owned a home. I came from nothing.
And now you're a
I
piece of shit.
thought my entire life was
Like, I don't-
based on the achievement of the American dream. Yes, I have billions
And there's a
of
lot of
dollars.
luck involved in that.
I earned it. No
A
one
lot.
gave it to me.
A lot
And I've
of luck.
shared it constantly with the people of Starbucks.
Like, of course, there's work
And so
involved
anyone
to
who
this kind of
keeps
success,
labeling this
but there's also a
billionaire
hell of a lot of
Mr.
luck.
Schultz, I don't mean to cut you off. We have time limits here, and you have
Well,
the
I just think-
opportunity. I'm not cutting you off.
It's your moniker constantly. It's unfair.
No, it is
I
not.
earned-
You have had more time. I've been generous with the time. I'm sorry.
But, Mr. Chairman.
We have a room full of people. We have panel to go after you. You're
Fine,
not the only
fine.
person testifying.
Okay.
Senator
This
Cassidy.
again goes to, like,
defer to Senator
Schultz
Martin.
not having, he just
Thank
thinking
you,
he
Ranking
like,
Member. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Schultz,
it's
I'm going to change
his
the
moment.
subject a little bit.
All about him.
Last year, your company decided to close 16 stores across the nation, including the Starbucks down the street here at Union Station, due to rising crime in these cities. Shortly thereafter, you stated that there are going to be many more closures for similar concerns. Your store managers are quoted saying that their employees have not felt safe amid a spike in crime, a surge of assaults, thefts, and drug use. I agree, in fact. In fact, I fear for my own staff walking home in this neighborhood. I feared so much that I purchased each one of them one of these noisemakers this past Christmas.
No, it would help.
One
Wealth
of our
equality.
colleagues' office staff was
Would help a
recently
lot.
violently assaulted as well. The lawlessness in this country is out of control. When you decided to close those 16 stores because you feared for your employees' safety, did you then, and do you still believe that the White House needs to focus on restoring law and order and relaying a
This
message
has nothing to do with
this
the topic.
country of respect for the brave men and women in law enforcement in this country?
Thank you, Senator. We do, in fact, have a significant issue of safety in urban cities around America. And Starbucks has closed many, many stores that were profitable as a result of the fact that our own people do not feel safe working in the stores. And we have a situation of homelessness, drugs, mental illness.
And why do you think that is,
and,
Mr.
as a
Billionaire
result of
Schultz?
that,
Why do you think
many of the societal issues that
wealth
we're
have anything to do with
facing
this? Wealth
today are
inequality,
difficult for
possibly,
Starbucks
maybe?
to address because we don't have the power or the responsibility to address these things as you've described.
You know, thank you for the
just the
for your
total
answer
lack
and
of
your
awareness
honesty.
here in this.
It's a sad day for this
in this
nation when the
discussion with
crime
these
is
two
so
people.
bad that you feel the need to close profitable shops because you can't keep your employees safe at their place of work. And I have to note for the record that every single location you closed, all 16 of them, were in Democrat-ran cities.
Yeah, Democrats don't treat this issue properly.
We have another saying. I'll change.
They're
change
also
the
controlled by
subject here
corporations,
again.
not proper
We have a
investment in
saying
labor.
back home that
This
pigs
is
get fat and hogs get slaughtered.
what?
You do have 645 unfair labor cases brought against you. Based upon the size of the crowd, there may be some smoke and fire together there. You know, this is your chance. Tell me your side of the story. Tell me why you have so many complaints. Do you feel like that there's been a fair negotiation process? Have you and your company been open to a negotiation process? So this is, give you a minute here, a minute and a half, just to tell me your side of the story.
Thank you. First off, with regard to the NLRB, Senator Cassidy mentioned a number of issues. Starbucks Coffee Company will abide by the law and follow the process. I hope the committee does investigate many of the things that are going on within the NLRB and the courage of the whistleblower to come forward with regard to the allegations that she has, that she wants to discuss with the committee. This process, unfortunately, has played out publicly in many different ways. And unfortunately, a public company in America today is unfortunately guilty before before anything.
So this is your chance.
Yeah.
So why are you innocent?
Yeah, we're innocent because
I
we've
think
done
you're doing just fine.
everything that we possibly can to respect the right under the law of our partner's ability to join a union. But conversely, we have consistently laid out our preference without breaking any law of communicating to our people about what we believe is a vision for the company. And when I went to Buffalo, even though it was cited before by Senator Casey, I never mentioned the word union once. I talked about the vision for Starbucks. And the reason is, post-COVID, 95% of the people wearing the green apron had worked for the company less than a year. They didn't know anything about Starbucks. So I went to Buffalo to share the story of Starbucks, what we have done as a company, equity in the form of stock options, comprehensive health insurance, all the things that we've done to provide opportunity for our people. I didn't go there to talk about the union. I went there to lay out our vision for the company. And I consistently have done that, as well as the leaders of Starbucks. We have not broken the law. We have simply tried to defend
I'll be right
ourselves
back.
and tell our employees, all of them, what we stand for, our future, the aspirations we have, the growth of the company, and the opportunity. Starbucks is, in many ways, the quintessential entrepreneurial company of the last 30 years. We've created 5 million jobs from a cup of coffee, and we've shared the profits with our people. And we've done all these things not because of the union, but because of the compassion, the empathy, and in many ways, my own story of understanding what happened to my father and trying to build the kind of company that my father never got a chance to work for. And that is the story of Starbucks.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, collective bargaining is a fundamentally conservative idea. Right? We've sort of lost track of that. I mean, it's rooted in free market principles, right? The idea that workers should be able to freely join together to negotiate in a free, open negotiation with their employer. And so it's kind of disappointing and sad and wild to me at how sort of partisan this debate has become. Democrats standing up for unions, Republicans saying they support collective bargaining, but not seeing that there's real genius in the idea in a free market society that workers get to come together. You know, it's funny, previous Republican candidates, you know, they really fought hard to work to win the union vote, to speak at union conventions. This sort of new dichotomy we have is, in fact, new. Mr. Schultz, what do you mean when you say that you abide by the law? So I guess when I do a search online to take a look at cases that have been brought against Starbucks for illegal firings.
This is a good question. I'm curious, too.
New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Kansas, Missouri, Washington, a decision out of Buffalo requiring you to reinstate workers, calling your practice egregious and calling your practices egregious and widespread misconduct. You say you follow the law, but then, of course, this committee sees repeated evidence of NLRB orders forcing you to reverse actions that were on their face a violation of the law. So when you say you don't break the law, you abide by the law, you mean you disagree with all of these decisions from the NLRB? You think they got it wrong in all of those cases?
I think what you're talking about is allegations that we look forward to in the process to defend ourselves. But if I can give you one specific case.
But these are
They're not allegations.
Some of these are orders from NLRB judges to reinstate employees based upon violations of conduct. Do you think in all of those cases in which judges have required stores to be reopened or for workers to be reinstated, that they just all got it wrong?
Well, in Memphis as an
in every case.
So in Memphis as an example, we do have.
Well, I'm not actually looking for. I'm
not
looking to litigate each specific case. Just to clarify, when you say that you are abiding by the law, you mean that in every case in which an NLRB judge has ordered you to take steps to remediate actions, in every single case they've gotten it wrong.
We will follow the law and follow the judge's order, but we look forward.
Right, but the judge is making a finding that you have engaged in conduct that is not allowed by the underlying law, i.e. illegal behavior. In every case, you believe that the judges got it wrong.
I believe the allegations will prove that Starbucks was correct.
They're not allegations.
And I can give you a perfect example if you're willing to listen.
What are you talking about?
Sure, I'm willing to
Okay,
listen.
so
they're not allegations.
Let's take Memphis, which has been a clear, isolated case, but I think indicative of the process.
Regardless of what he says here.
Safety at Starbucks is critically important. We want to
protect
and preserve the safety of every one of our people. In 1997, we had a tragedy in Georgetown where 3 Starbucks partners were murdered. And so as a result of that, we have always taken safety very seriously. But after that, everything we do is about partner safety. Now, in Memphis, a Starbucks person who agreed to join the union, after hours, opened up that store for activities that were not consistent with safety and procedures at Starbucks. No one should open up a store that is closed. The manager took a disciplinary approach and terminated that person. That person was reinstated. That is the fact. safety is key at Starbucks. So we can't be held accountable for things that we believe under the procedures of Starbucks that are based on safety for our people. And that is a clear violation of our procedures.
I understand. I'm trying to square your testimony in which you insist that you rigorously follow the law.
Yes.
With overwhelming evidence
that you don't
from the organizations that are charged with enforcing American labor law, that is not the case. It is akin to someone who has been ticketed for speeding 100 times, saying, I've never violated the law because every single time the cop got it wrong. That would not be a believable contention if someone was to make that before the committee. And so I find it hard to believe your insistence that notwithstanding this extraordinary set of decisions, reinstating workers, forcing stores to be reopened, that you are in fact consistently abiding by the law as your testimony is before this committee.
I don't believe Starbucks has broken the law.
Oh my God.
Let me just
they
make
did.
a
I don't
couple
even understand
observations relative to what has been said on the other side of the
This is so ridiculous.
of the dais. First, we should have.
It's like
as I
denying the
mentioned
election
earlier,
results.
An investigation as
It's
the
like, nope,
NLRB
Biden
activities.
didn't win, but no,
They're being
he's the
made out as
president.
if they're a
Nope,
totally
didn't win.
objective player in all this circumstance. But here I have a letter from NLRB confirming that the OIG is investigating allegations of misconduct by the NLRB employees in Region 14. Now, we can say, oh my gosh, NLRB is supposed to be neutral. There is tangible evidence that they're not. Secondly,
which I'm sure is bullshit,
sorry,
but let's
Senator
say
Murphy
it's
left.
true. One case
Republicans down
out of
here
130
totally
times.
supported the right of people to organize. I'll also point out that it was Republicans who were standing up for the trade unions when his first week of his presidency, Joe Biden canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. Canceled it when those trade unions needed those jobs to make their pensions. And by the way, if I may point out, subsequently the administration has gone hat in hand to Venezuela and the Middle East asking for more production. If they had not canceled that pipeline, that oil would now be coming down to the state of Louisiana, employing more workers in my state, refining that oil in the most environmentally sensitive way. So I kind of stand by.
Got to
our
refine
side.
that oil in the most environmentally sensitive way. Get the
let's explore a little
F out of here.
There's this impression that the unionization
Such clownish
has occurred
behavior.
organically. But you mentioned earlier, and
Why
I
does
think
this
I have
chat
some
keep
facts
freezing?
here,
It's really frustrating.
that the person in
Let's
Buffalo
reset this again.
was making $69,000 a year when she went to work for the store and began to organize. I think that's called salting. But it wasn't as if there's this organic, let's just all come together and unionize. No, workers of the world unite. It was, no, somebody was paid to go in there and create an environment where 4 out of 6 people might do it. I don't know if that was the 4 out of 6 union. Any comments upon this person getting paid by the union when she came to your store in an attempt to organize it?
Well, if that's not a nefarious act, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it does seem just a little bit inorganic.
Oh my God, the smugness of that statement, knowing
your company
broke the law 130 times.
That Starbucks has not been found to have violated the law as part of any enforced order of the NLRB. Now, Senator Murphy suggested that you are guilty because you've been charged, and yet you're pointing out that you've not been found to violate the law. Will you kind of reconcile those two statements?
Are we living in different realities
that is
here?
Correct. We have not been found guilty of any violation. These are allegations. We look forward to the process that Congress has set up, and I think we will avail ourselves that these will be proven not true.
Now, I just made the point, I forget if I
Labor
requested
judge.
this, but I would like to enter to the record the letter from NLRB confirming that they are being investigated for NLRB employees' misconduct in Region 14.
Without objection.
Do you have any comments upon what I feel is to be the politicalization of NLRB? From your perspective, is that a real thing?
I don't really have any comment on that. I hope the committee will look closely at it.
Okay. Now, there's been a lot made that contracts have not yet been achieved, so-called first contracts. I have something here from a Bloomberg report that it took on average, 465 days for first contracts in a variety of industries to be achieved. More than a half took more than a full year or to sign. It's being argued that you're not negotiating in good faith because you have not yet achieved the contract. And yet that seems to be consistent with the pattern of how these first contracts come about. Is there any statement you'd like to make on that?
I think that's true. As I said earlier, we've shown up about 85 times to have a face-to-face meeting.
And you didn't have the
We tried
meetings.
to set up 365 additional meetings. And we are very clear. We're ready and able to have face-to-face negotiations, and we will do so at a moment's notice.
Now,
We've already gone through how this is
General
bullshit.
Counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, found that you had violated federal labor law by refusing to bargain if some attended over Zoom. I didn't realize it was a law that you had to be able to go over Zoom. But any comment upon Ms. Abruzzo, who some have found to be an advocate for unions in terms of this particular
As opposed to every single judge and advocate
finding?
being for corporations.
You know, I think I've
Are
been
you
in
out of your
business
mind?
for many, many years.
This discussion is so ridiculous.
Face-to-face meetings, negotiations, collaborative sessions, they're all better to be had than anything that is on Zoom.
Is there a law that says that you have to do it over Zoom if one party chooses to go over
You
Zoom?
have to do the meeting. It's not going to say Zoom,
okay.
you
I haven't heard
idiot.
of it either. I yield.
Holy, the bad faith of these discussions.
Senator Hassan.
Unbelievable.
I'm happy to yield to Senator Markey for a minute, and then I'll follow up after him if that works.
Let's hear. Mark is
Senator
usually pretty
Markey.
good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this important hearing. And Mr. Schultz, it's good of you to show up, but then again, you face little choice. It's disappointing to me that it took such a long time and required the threat of a subpoena for you to appear before this committee. And it's frankly disrespectful to your hundreds of thousands of employees, but we do appreciate you finally appearing here. All across America, workers are saying that they've had enough. Rising inequality and outlandish CEO pay for those at the top, like you, and a paycheck-to-paycheck subsistence for everyone else. The unionizing Starbucks workers are on the front lines as a groundswell of working and middle-class people who are banding together to assert their right to organize, form a union, and collectively bargain for their dignity. My father used to tell me that you can't beg for your rights, you have to tell them. He lost his finger in an industrial accident as a young man. There was no OSHA. He just said, the boss said, see you next week, John, back on the job. That was before unions. That was before rights were put on the books. And ultimately, that's what Starbucks workers are doing. Workers in Buffalo are the spark that's lit the fire of organizing its locations across the country, including 15 Starbucks locations in Massachusetts. The American people are watching. Public support for unions hit a record high late last year with 71% of Americans approving of labor unions. So as you sit here denigrating your workers, you're not just morally and legally wrong, you're in the minority. You're out of touch. Union busting is disgusting. I got the chance this week to meet with Caitlin, who is a Starbucks employee from Gardner, Massachusetts. Like you, Caitlin cares deeply about Starbucks. She originally started working for the company in 2006 and came back to rejoin Starbucks in 2021. When she came back, she saw Starbucks similar to how you describe it in your testimony, a company that had lost its way. She saw a company that now only cared about money at the expense of the health and well-being of its workers. So to help save the Starbucks she once knew and loved, Caitlin and her co-workers formed a union. They wanted to revive a wayward company, make your company better. But you vilify Caitlin and her colleagues for caring. You demonize them for participating in their fundamental right to organize. And worse, you and your company set out to punish Caitlin and her colleagues, withholding benefits and raises, cutting hours, and purposefully understaffing to harm their most dedicated partners. So when you give us 10 pages of testimony extolling the benefits that Starbucks offers its employees, that's not what I see. I see Caitlin. I see you squeezing the people who have made you rich with blatant disregard for the law. Perhaps because you think if you can hire the lawyers and pay the union-busting consulting firms, you can get away with violating other people's rights, with disregarding their dignity, and with silencing working people in America. But here's the thing. If you can pay the lawyers and the consultants and the PR specialists, you can also pay the workers a fair wage. So you say that your father was unfairly fired after he was injured on the job. Your father had no rights, and your family paid the price. That is how your workers now feel. They have no rights. They don't want to be like your father, who had no rights. They don't want their families to have to pay the price for their children the way your father had to pay a price for his children. They want rights. Your father couldn't protect himself. That's all your workers are looking for, so they can protect themselves and their families so that what happened to your family does not happen to their family. I don't think you understand that, Mr. Schultz. They're just looking to be someone who can protect themselves in a way your father could not. So, Mr. Schultz, I would just hope that you would understand that. But I'm afraid you don't. I'm afraid that if you step down as CEO, that you don't understand that these people are afraid that your company will lose its way again, and that they need rights that don't just come from you, but come from the company. That's what they're looking for. It lost its way, you say you're back, but it could lose its way again. Workers should not be dependent upon you, Mr. Schultz, in your sense of right and wrong. They should be able to have laws, protections, unions that stand up for them every single day of the year. And that is something I think, Mr. Schultz, that you just fundamentally don't understand. These workers are just like your father, and they have no rights.
Really
Can I
good.
respond, sir?
That was good.
30 seconds.
Only 30 seconds. I need more time for that.
Well, I'm sorry, that's all.
You bring up my father.
Every member here
You
is.
bring up my father. You don't understand, sir. My father was a World War II veteran, fought for this country in the South Pacific. You don't understand.
I understand
Yeah,
completely.
let
Your
me-
father
yeah.
was...
Can I finish, sir?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Your father served our country, and then the company he worked for...
Can I respond, Chairman?
Yes,
please.
Okay. I don't understand. Let me ask you a question, since you cited the union as the answer. Is there a union contract that you personally are aware of that provides comprehensive health insurance, equity in the form of stock option, free college tuition? Is there at $17.50 and an average of $27 with benefits? Are you aware of a union contract? Sir, answer the question. Of a union contract
This is not
that
even-
has those benefits?
That doesn't
Sir?
matter.
Mr. Schultz.
Are you aware?
Mr. Schultz, here's your testimony.
This is not the argument. This is not the discussion.
Looking back,
Oh,
looking
Mr.
back, it
He
is
broke
clear
labor
that
law.
prior to
That's
my
the
return
discussion.
last April, the company had lost its
I
way.
asked you
That
a
it had
question.
fallen under the dangerous influence of Wall
asked you a
Street
simple question, just like you asked
short-termism
me.
that I had always tried
I
to...
asked you a question, sir.
The
Sir,
workers
don't
are
understand.
asking
Your testimony
to
says that
unionize.
your own company lost its way, and it will lose its way again unless there's a
Okay.
union there
In a-
to make
Senator
it
Hassan,
accountable.
thank you.
It doesn't matter if it's the
Hassan.
greatest company in the world. If the workers are trying to form a
Any
union
company.
and you are
Schultz.
breaking labor
Mr.
law to
Schultz.
prevent them from doing so,
Senator
that's the
Hassan,
issue.
You don't understand.
Thank
This
you,
is,
Mr.
like,
Chairman.
his defense
and I
here
wanna thank
is
you
he
for
really-
holding this hearing today to discuss
Schultz is really up his own
reports
ass.
of illegal union busting at Starbucks locations across the country. So in New England alone, there are 19 unionized Starbucks stores, and a total of 8 unfair labor practice violations have been filed by the workers' union. So it is absolutely critical that we hold companies accountable when they fail to comply with federal labor law. Mr. Schultz, I am seriously concerned by reports that Starbucks is coercing and retaliating against workers for exercising their rights to organize. For example, by unjustly firing workers who are involved in union organizing, conducting surveillance of union organizers, and reducing their work hours. Until 2 weeks ago, you were the CEO of Starbucks, and you continue to be a member of the board of directors as well as a major shareholder. So what I want to know is this. I know that Senator Casey asked you about reports that Starbucks was surveilling workers who were engaged in organizing. Do you have any knowledge that such surveillance took place?
I had no knowledge of that, sir.
Who decided to move these workers to other locations, the workers who were engaged in organizing, or to reduce their hours or fire them?
I'm unaware of that.
So you had no participation in decisions about moving workers who were engaged in organizing?
I had no involvement in any specific issue that regards the union.
He's relying so
district,
heavily
or
on
store.
plausible
No.
deniability.
Were you or your successor involved in any of these decisions? I'm just asking again.
No.
These could all be private conversations.
Mr. Schultz, the
that
National
he doesn't have to pretend to
National
know
Labor
about.
Relations Board has filed over 80 complaints against Starbucks for this kind of activity that I just asked you about. Starbucks leadership really needs to end these practices. You've said you don't know anything about them. You've also, as you discussed with Senator Markey, indicated in the past that you came back because you felt the company had lost its way. So I will just add my concern about these reports of these activities and urge you as a board member to take action to make sure that the rights of workers who are engaged in organizing activity are protected. Now, as you know, the National Labor Relations Act requires an employer to bargain collectively with its employees' union representatives. It has been more than 450 days since the first Starbucks union was established, yet there has been little evidence of good faith negotiations between Starbucks and its union. The delay is truly unacceptable. As CEO of Starbucks, what exactly did you do to move union negotiations along in a timely way?
We said consistently, Senator, that we are prepared to have collective bargaining sessions when they are face-to-face, and we are ready, willing, and able.
Well, the record to date is unacceptable, 450 days. What will you do as someone who continues to serve on the company's board of directors to remedy the situation?
We want to have these meetings. We've scheduled 85. We've been to 85. We've tried to schedule 365, and we're ready to do that.
And my understanding is that on multiple occasions after you schedule them, the company cancels them at the last minute. And I would suggest to you that that is not acceptable. The facts really do speak for themselves on this issue. Starbucks is an outlier here. So you need to quickly shift course and negotiate with your unionized workers.
Uh-oh, I'm still here.
This is Woodsy Desk.
Come on now.
And it's the first desk you'll ever love.
Companies and the economy. For example, the president of the Teamsters spoke about how they've partnered with United Airlines to build out an apprenticeship program that would create 1,000 good-paying middle-class jobs. Knowing that other large companies successfully collaborate with unions, why has Starbucks not done more to collaborate with its workers' unions?
I don't think that's true.
This guy.
Well, failing to reach a contract over
Why are you here then?
This time period between request to organize and getting
Holy
contracts
crap.
done indicates that you are resisting unionization as opposed to working with the union and then collaborating with it.
Senator, we respect the right of every person who wears a green apron if they want to join a union, but we also have the right to communicate to the 99%, 350,000 people.
Take
who
a
want
drink
direct
every time he says
relationship with the
green
company.
apron or partners.
So
We'd all
my
be
question is,
freaking
why
sloshed right now.
not work with the union and collaborate? And why not get the input from the unions to actually improve things for workers?
Well, we've sat down 85 times to have those meetings, and we hope to have some more.
So again, I will just urge you, there are lots of examples of large employers who work well with their unions, and they actually find that their business does better when they negotiate with unions, reach contracts, and collaborate with those unions. So I would urge you to take that approach. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schultz, thank you for being here today. I have a series of questions. Some of them are yes or no's, and I hope to be able to cover a lot of ground here if it's possible. Mr. Schultz, yes or no, does Starbucks provide employees with generous benefits like health care, paid parental leave, and college scholarships?
Yes,
And you're proud that Starbucks does that?
very proud.
I understand that part-time employees need to work at least 240 hours over the course of 3 consecutive months, or roughly 20 hours a week, to be eligible for those benefits. Is that true?
I'm not sure that's correct, sir. I'd have to get back to you. I don't think that's correct.
I don't want to ask one of your lawyers.
How does he not know?
I believe that to be true.
He was the CEO. Like, how do you know?
I see a lot of head
You
nodding
don't know
from
this?
employees behind you. But nonetheless, I can submit a question to the record so that you can definitively say yes or no to that. Mr. Schultz, what happens if workers' hours fall below a threshold, as I suggested? Are you able to answer that question to their benefits?
I think their benefits would be in question, and the manager would try and get their schedule up so they don't lose their benefits.
So I understand that Starbucks has a widespread pattern of reducing worker hours in stores that have unionized. After conversations with constituents from New Mexico, that's what I've learned. And why does Starbucks reduce workers' hours at unionized stores?
I'm not aware we do that, sir.
They won't believe. Mr. Schultz, you announced in May 2022 that the company would raise pay and double training hours at its more than 10,000 corporate-owned stores, but you said that these changes and others would not apply to unionized stores or stores where workers had filed for union elections. Mr. Schultz, yes or no, did you say this?
Yes, my understanding was that we were not allowed under the law to provide benefits unilaterally to stores and partners that were involved in unions.
Was there a finding at the NLRB along these lines as well?
I'm unaware of that.
Related to that statement?
I'm unaware of that.
And yes or no, do you claim that Starbucks cannot make changes to benefits without good faith collective bargaining?
That is my understanding.
The National Labor Relations Board requires an employer and the union to bargain in good faith about wages, hours, and other terms of employment until they agree on a labor contract, not after. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And yes or no, just so that I understand correctly, is it true that Starbucks can hold shareholder meetings virtually, but it refuses to allow some union members to join bargaining negotiations virtually, even if other members are present?
That's correct.
The reason that I asked the question about the reduction in hours, Mr. Schultz, is I certainly commend and appreciate what decisions were made about respecting employees, about valuing employees as well. What concerns me is practices that have been shared with me where a reduction in hours, where an employee maybe once worked full-time, 36 hours or so, but then hours were changed at that property for whatever reasons. I'll suggest that I believe it's because of unionization, and look forward to getting your response there. But then the employees, I'm told, have to be on call or made available if Starbucks decides to add a shift or something. Is that true?
Sir, I'm unaware of a specific store or situation in New Mexico. I'm sorry.
I'm not asking about a specific store.
Generally.
Starbucks across the country in many properties has reduced hours of employees. That's a fact. Is that correct?
For union workers?
For anyone. They've reduced hours.
We adjust the schedule based on our business.
When someone hours are reduced, if it's for business, does Starbucks have a policy where that employee has to make themselves available if Starbucks decides to call them back in for a shift that they're not scheduled for? Your head nod indicates a yes. I believe the answer would be yes.
Let me try and answer that. The manager and the assistant manager works very closely with the people in the store to adjust hours to accommodate people's work-life balance as much as we possibly can.
Okay, well, that's not my understanding. I'd be happy to submit something into the record. Okay. My concern is this. If a store changes its hours, reduces its open hours, staff's schedules are changed, they're reduced from 36 hours to 20 hours, but they're told they need to stay available, well, how do they get another job? If you can't get another job and they're trying to go to school or do something to broaden whatever they're doing in their lives,
yeah.
But then a policy is put in place that says, no, we're going to reduce your hours and you have to stay on call. Whether it's a manager or not, that's a Starbucks policy. I just hope with all of this, that's not a policy.
I worked for a news network,
Well,
and this was the
we'd
case.
be happy to pull you in to visit with folks from New Mexico.
You'd have to be on call, and if you didn't answer
and review,
when they wanted your
some of those
shift, then they
areas
would
as well
basically
that I've
you go
been,
like to the bottom of the list,
from others. So I
and
look
you have
forward
less
to that as
chance
well.
of getting a
But
shift
I hope
because you
that can be
rejected that
done
shift
here
for
in
them
all
when they
of this.
called
But
you. So
look,
you
there's a
couldn't
lot
do
of
anything in your
interest,
life.
There's
You
cameras
couldn't
outside and all the rest.
say your grandma's having like
Mr.
a
Schultz,
birthday. You can't even
this
go to it
company
because
started
they may
in a
call you for a
strong
shift.
way
It's ridiculous.
with
It's a
what it
terrible way
did
to live.
with its anchor stores out in Seattle and around Washington. You know, there's the NLRB case where they got closed, and there's allegations that they've got to open up again, or I don't know, and they're being appealed. So I don't want to get into all of that stuff. But going to what Mr. Markey said, with testimony that we lost our way,
I want to be here when the panel.
I certainly
Bernie,
hope
turn your mic on.
that we can find that way back. Because a lot of folks support Starbucks because the employees were treated well. And I just hope that that's something that we can work on together, but I look forward to following up with your staff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I'm incredibly proud of the long-term track record.
Mr. Chairman, if I can't speak any longer, I didn't ask a question to Mr. Schultz. I'd be happy to ask a question if you'd like a response.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. What we're going to do is we have a wonderful panel that's going to be up here in a second. You have not voted yet, and I have not voted yet.
Mr. Chair, but
Yeah.
just for 30 seconds, can I be recognized to submit a letter into the record from the Albuquerque store that sent it to Mr. Schultz?
Without objection. Let me conclude this session with Mr. Schultz in saying that we are looking at a situation where one side has all the money, has all the power, has all the consultants, can hire and fire at will. We're looking at another side where workers are making not very good wages, wages that were forced up, as I understand it, by the threat of unionization, so that you now have a $15 an hour minimum wage. We're looking at a situation, as Senator Lujan just mentioned. You know, we're in a lovely room here. This is one world. Out there in the real world, whether it's Seattle or Vermont or wherever it is, people are given arbitrary schedules as to when they can and cannot get to work. Sometimes they're working 20 hours a week. Sometimes they're working 30 hours a week. Hard to build a budget around that. But at the end of the day, this hearing is not about my best-selling book. It's not about Venezuela. And it's a good book. People should read it. But the issue is pretty simple. Workers have a right to join a union. In hundreds of shops that you control, workers have voted to join a union. There is zero union contracts. What I am not only asking you, I am urging you, is do not only the right thing, do what is legal. Sit down. Now, you've said you're prepared to sit down face to face. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Do it. Sit down in the next 2 weeks, come back to us and tell us the success that you've had in finally negotiating a first contract. That is my hope. And with that,
Do I get to say a statement?
you do.
Yes. And I would also say this hearing is about how we should have a neutral process by which NLRB is making not a thumb on the scale on the
Yeah, it
side
should
of
be
one
neutral.
side or the other, but in which
It's
they are
not.
attempting to have a
It's
neutral
in favor of
process.
massive corporations.
And this committee should be investigating the allegations that we have a confirmation that OIG is investigating, that there are NLRB employees who are doing precisely that. Now, we, on this side of the aisle, firmly defend the ability of people to unionize, and we have promoted policies much more favorable for unions, for example, Keystone XL Pipeline, and it absolutely has to do with the administration's desire to buy oil from Venezuela than from Canada. Why in the world that would be, I don't know. And employing American workers and American trade unions.
What are we talking
why
about
that would be, I don't know. But nonetheless, that's their call, and that's not mine. But we should not, in this committee, presume that someone is guilty before we have done our own independent evaluation, particularly because it would depend upon an evaluation by NLRB, which we happen to know right now is under investigation for being biased.
NLB is not under investigation for anything. All right, with that.
Their employees are.
Mr.
Their
Schultz,
employees
thank
are.
you very much for being with us.
So
we're going to
absurd.
recess for 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a very excellent panel joining us.
Like
Thank
the
you.
amount of power these billionaires and corporations have, and then 20 minutes, he said? Okay. I have a hard out at like 1 p.m. So I got to figure out. I'll try to stay as long as I can for the next portion because they're gonna have. Let me turn this volume or mute it. There we go. They're gonna have some experts on, I imagine, some employees or former employees of Starbucks discussing this issue. So it should be good. But I got to be out of here by 1 p.m. So we will see what's happening. Let me just do something here, and I will get to some super chats. What the hell? Sorry. Super chats in a second. I'm just trying to figure something out. All right. All right. Let me get to some chats now. Maybe I'll put on this freaking. These people are loud in the room. Maybe for some atmosphere here. I have this chatter in the background. All right. Okay. Let me figure this out. So, super chats. Here we go. Progressive Boomer, I think I read yours. Thank you. Jason L says, "Hi, David. Just recently started following you, but I am curious what has you so interested in U.S. politics as a Canadian?" So, I've answered this question like a million times. It's just what I'm interested. There are a lot of people that are not, American citizens that cover U.S. politics. It's just what I grew up, being into. Photog Mike says it's all about the day old, and I gotta have a larger discussion about the importance of U.S. politics on a global scale, which of course adds to my interest in it, but generally just because I've just always been into it. Photog Mike, it's all about the day old sous vide. How do you say that? Sous vide eggs. That was in reference to So at one point during this hearing. I think it was Bill Cassidy, was defending Starbucks by saying, well, Starbucks, they're so generous, they give unused food to the homeless as opposed to putting it in the garbage. Like, here you go, here's a stale scone, congratulations. Like, how that is supposed to be some defense of Starbucks is really just, it shows you that they are grasping at straws to defend Howard Schultz here. Luke says, an hour ago it was like 9:30. There was no way your barista had enough time to tell his life story during the morning coffee rush. Lawn Gnome says, saw an article in The Lever yesterday that Starbucks is using the litigation process to gain access to employee private conversations. Such bad faith negotiations. I did not catch that. The Lever does fantastic work, by the way. Levernews.com, I think is the website. Yes, levernews.com. Really good stuff. It's David Sirota's outlet. So of course, good work there. Balthazar says, with this much corporate filleting, I'm shocked this isn't TOS. Still Alive says, does Schultz have main character syndrome? He definitely does. Schultz thinks he's like the shit. I'm curious what they're going to say here. Let's hear a bit of this. Turn this up.
Welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Recent interview, he's got a book tour, he's making the rounds. At this point, what's the stage of his interest for future political office?
Well, Governor Ron DeSantis is certainly doing everything that candidates who are interested in
Okay. What? Why not talk about what just happened? Okay, whatever. let's get something else. WizPig Tactics says, I think he meant smoke and mirrors, not fires. I must have missed that. Brenda says, I hate being represented by Roger Marshall. All right, thank you all for your super chats. Let me turn these people down on my end here. Just going to double check in the background to see if I have gotten all of them, because sometimes they don't show up. But yeah, so I'm going to, in case you're coming late, here's Still Alive. Let me get your chat. In case you're coming late, there is another portion to this where they're going to bring on experts. This is how this is always done. They first do this big, discussion with like the main person, in this case, Howard Schultz of Starbucks. And then they bring on experts in the field. Both Democrats and Republicans get to bring people on to discuss this topic. So I assume we're going to see, it may just be labor experts, but there may also be Starbucks employees or former employees there to discuss their experience. But Still Alive says, as silly as the defense of Schultz is, do you ultimately think it's still effective or no? They're laughable, yes. Why is this scrolling past me? They're laughable, yes, but if they are effective, we know they do it this way, right? Well, effective to who, I guess, is my question. Like who are we talking about? Will some of the public be like, oh, of course, yes, Starbucks is a great company. They do all these things for their employees. Some people will think that. Will still think that. But there has, it depends on the person, obviously. At the very least, I think this plants seeds for people to realize, who may not be aware, that Starbucks has broken labor law over 100 times. That even if you claim to be very respectful of your employees, you call them partners as a performative mechanism, but your employees, like, again, just on the partners thing, how can you call them partners and then union bust the entire time and not recognize any of the unions or attempts to unionize, not negotiate a contract? Like, you call them partners, but you won't recognize them as actual partners. It's all performative garbage. But I think there's some good moments there. I think Bernie, of course, laid it out well. Ed Markey. There were a number of Democrats that actually did a pretty good job. Even, who was it? Braun, a Republican senator, was like, $17 an hour is nothing to brag about for a company the size of yours. When a Republican senator says that, hey, maybe you make some progress there. I think, if anything has the potential to maybe change some, conservative minds, it's maybe seeing a Republican senator saying that $17 an hour is nothing to brag about for a company the size of Starbucks. But it's hard to really know the impact of something like this, especially considering no one's who's watching this. We're watching this, right? But like, are people really tuned into C-SPAN right now? This is more about if this will get coverage later. And ultimately, it's about, the workers at Starbucks. And if there's enough shame going on here of the company for the next CEO who's replacing Howard Schultz to change strategy in any way, and I don't expect that they will. Alex says the idea that any union would not accept a unilateral wage or benefit increase is absolutely absurd. Yeah, like Howard Schultz arguing that, well, we can't offer our employees who want to unionize the wage increases because that may interfere with the process of negotiating. Like, what are you talking about? It was clearly a way for them to try and bust unions, for them to discourage people from wanting to unionize by only offering increased pay and benefits for people who were not voting to unionize, like that, which again is illegal. You can't do that. Even though Howard Schultz was saying, well, my understanding was that we can't give them those benefits. No, your understanding is incorrect. Okay. Again, I have to get out of here at 1 p.m. They're going to come back shortly, so we'll see. But actually, there was a tweet somewhere. Let me find a tweet. Just showing that a lot of Starbucks workers are showing up to this. I don't know why they're talking about DeSantis right now. This could just be their normal. I think this is just their normal show. So they're just cutting to that and showing that on screen in the meantime. But they should have, have some people on this story discussing this. But here, so More Perfect Union says unionized Starbucks workers from across the country have arrived at the Capitol to watch a billionaire former CEO Howard Schultz get grilled by the Senate about the company's rampant illegal union busting. Look at these wonderful people.
Your own reporting into that.
Any audio on this? I don't believe there is. Oh, there's a little bit. All right. They're still talking to Sanders. Okay. All right, let me grab some more chats. Earthworm says, thank you. Love your informative snarks. Oh, thank you so much. It's a delicate balance between, talking and not wanting to talk over any important points being made, which is hard to do because these hearings are, it's person to person to person. There's very little breaks in between, but I did what I could. Where do we go to hear the rest? It's gonna be here on C-SPAN 3, but there's like a 20-minute break right now for them to regroup and use the washroom, maybe eat a sandwich. Let me scroll up through some of these chats here. And again, this chat box behind me, it'll freeze randomly, and then there'll be like 100 right there. Hey, maybe my hand movements move it. That was perfect timing. Go up. There, it's working out. I don't know why it freezes and then does that. It's bizarre. Smokable. I'm not doing that right now. I have to do something in about half an hour. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to likely have to cut off this stream in the middle of what is going on, or what is going to be going on, just so you know. Reuters has a stream too. I assume it's going to come back here, right? Yeah, hearing resumes shortly, so it's going to come back. Nevada garbage trucks. Thank you. Thank you for your work and for your super chat. Well, I guess in the meantime, let's see what's happening here. What are they talking about? What's going on here?
Let's hear from Brian. He's in Michigan on our independent line for Kimberly Leonard of Insider. She serves as their policy and politics correspondent. Brian, good morning. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Pedro. Good morning, Kimberly. I will tie it in real quick. I'll try to be short and sweet. Now, I've served under 16 captains. I had to look it up. I served at the highest level. I've served under gentlemen captains, all types. By far, the best captain of all that made the most serious, he was right on course on everything. Actually, I don't know that I'd bring him home to meet my mom. He was hardline. So let me tie this in for you about leadership.
What does this have to do with?
If we could name one policy, one legal legislation, or anything like that, because we keep bringing up former President Trump now with DeSantis, because we discussed that already, so it is tied in. And I've asked a lot. I'm an independent. independent-minded from the start, from high school. So I don't get on one side of the aisle or the
Get on
other.
with it.
Never have. It bores me. I'm not a.
What's your
it's
question?
Just childish.
Got your point,
in my
caller.
opinion.
So what's the question?
No, I'm going to tie it in here. Name one policy, because you already brought them up already every morning. Name one policy that overall.
Good. They cut him off.
Thank you all very
All
much
right.
for your
We're
patience.
back at it.
It's an important vote that we had to cast.
Jake W. says, please pin the link. When I'm about to go, I will. It's, go to cspan.org. It's right
to
there.
have an excellent panel, which will include Maggie Carter, Jaislyn Saxton, Sharon Block, Bradley Byrne, and Rachel Gressler. Our first witness is Maggie Carter. Ms. Carter began working at Starbucks part-time 4 years ago to get health benefits and pay while attending the University of Tennessee. Her store in Knoxville, Tennessee was the first Starbucks store in the South to unionize, and since then, Ms. Carter has helped workers at numerous other stores organize, and I'm delighted to have her here to talk about her experience. Ms. Carter, thanks for being with us. Turn the mic on and
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
So my name is Maggie Carter, and I'm a single mom to a beautiful 8-year-old boy named Colson. Being his mom is the absolute greatest gift of my life. He's why I ended up at Starbucks, the only place to offer me part-time benefits and what I thought would be flexible scheduling while in school. As a lesbian, I was also drawn to Starbucks by its reputation as a progressive employer. I started working at Starbucks in Jackson, Tennessee in May of 2019. I was paid $8.35 an hour. Then March of 2020 came, and it felt as if the world shut down, just not at Starbucks. I worked consistently from day one of the pandemic because as a single mom, I didn't have a choice. In April 2020, I told my manager I needed to move from Jackson to Knoxville. It wasn't until 2 months later she responded, telling me I had only 48 hours to decide between quitting and being rehired in Knoxville, losing all of my seniority and benefits, or taking a leave of absence without pay and crossing my fingers to see if I would be transferred to a Knoxville store. Because of COVID, the company had frozen the normally easy transfer process. I couldn't risk losing my benefits, so I chose the second option, but it meant that I went without pay for 3 months. Luckily, I was able to begin work at a Knoxville store in August 2020. The whole situation was a punch to the gut, and the emotional impact of the disrespect I felt ultimately contributed to my belief in the need to organize a union. In October of 2021, Starbucks announced that starting pay would increase to $15 an hour almost a year later. I scoured the internet searching Starbucks wages, benefits, pay increases, and I learned about Starbucks workers organizing. I shared this information with my coworkers, and we decided to stand together to file for an election on Christmas Eve. We were proud to be the first store in the South. But it wasn't without an epic fight because Starbucks resisted us every step of the way. Just 5 days after announcing our union drive, our regional director drove to our store from out of state and was working alongside my partners, attempting to make drinks. It's the first time in my entire time with the company that I've met a regional director in person. Partners suddenly started getting disciplined for minor dress code violations or being 5 or so minutes late. Every day, it felt as if there was a concerted effort to build a case against partners who showed even the smallest bit of support for the union. Days prior to ballots being mailed out for the election, managers closed our store for hour-long periods, most during peak operating times, to hold impromptu captive audience meetings. It felt like the company was suddenly paying full attention to us and were willing to throw absolutely anything at us to deter us from organizing. We won our vote 1 year ago today, March 29th, 2022. Since then, we've made every attempt to try to bargain in good faith with the company. Starbucks walked out on our store's only scheduled bargaining session after just 30 minutes. On May 3rd, the company announced that partners who were organizing or had already unionized would not receive a series of important benefit increases that non-union stores would be granted. My partners, along with thousands of partners across the country, still do not have access to these benefits, nor do we have a company that is willing to sit across the table with us and bargain for them. This is part of my store's campaign story, but if you look to the 7,500 plus members of Starbucks Workers United, you will find thousands of stories that detail similar or more grotesque accounts of Starbucks behavior during their scorched earth union busting campaign. My coworker Michelle Eisen stated it perfectly when she testified before the House. It should not take an act of bravery to ensure you have a voice at work. Dated laws allow so much room for companies to harshly assert themselves. Unequal resources combined with unbalanced power dynamics ensure that the company's voice will often be louder than the collective voice of workers. Schultz has made a career selling the idea of offering benefits to part-time workers because he wanted to operate a different kind of company. I'm a single mother working tirelessly for this company for 4 years, and I'm certainly not alone in feeling nothing but left behind during a time where everything we knew about the world was uncertain. You cannot be pro-partner and anti-union. It's well past time for the company to bargain in good faith. Help us hold them accountable. Thank you for allowing partners to have a seat at this table alongside former CEO Howard Schultz, because that is significantly more than he was willing to offer. To Starbucks' new CEO, Laxman Narasimhan, you have an opportunity to chart a different course, to truly make Starbucks the different kind of company Schultz promised but failed epically to produce. This is a chance for your company to stop its unprecedented campaign of union busting and instead partner with us, your so-called partners, and our union to build a company that truly lives up to its stated progressive values. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Our next witness is Jason Saxton, who is a former Starbucks shift supervisor. Mr. Saxton started working at Starbucks in Augusta, Georgia. In 2019, he and his coworkers successfully unionized their store in April 2022, and in July 22, after a 2-day strike, he was illegally fired by Starbucks. Mr. Saxton, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. My name is Jason Saxton. I am a wrongfully fired Starbucks worker from Augusta, Georgia. I started with the company in 2019, hired on as a shift supervisor. In time, I became the go-to not only for baristas, but management as well. I was recognized for my dedication and hard work, as well as the positive and infectious energy and environment I created for partners and customers. I even won Partner of the Quarter. My time at Starbucks wasn't all bad. I met my amazing wife, who is now the mother of our 2-year-old, Ava. I got to be there for the customers who relied on us during the pandemic and support my coworkers whose families were also going through some really tough times. Being a disabled veteran with osteoarthritis of the spine from my time in the Coast Guard, I felt it was my duty to serve my country again, in order to make my workplace more equitable, but also so that my work family could have what they needed to survive. We faced many failed and broken systems working at Starbucks when we began to organize a union. We saw that Starbucks had failed at honoring its stated mission and values, so we chose to live up to them in challenging the status quo. In late 2021, when we started to hear about Starbucks workers in Buffalo organizing a union, I thought, we need this too. I reached out to Starbucks Workers United to see how we could get started organizing in our store and began talking to my coworkers. We kept organizing despite increasing retaliation and surveillance. The company sent higher-up managers to our store, and it felt like it was just to surveil us. The regional director, who drove down from Atlanta, was in our store regularly with the district manager. We were disciplined for minor things that happened in the store, like being written up for being 2 minutes late, which had never happened before. Terminations increased too. A partner who experienced sexual harassment from one of our managers was terminated after reporting it. They held captive audience meetings, they called them one-on-ones, for us to have all of the facts, but the partners were outnumbered every time. In these meetings, partners were being threatened with losing their benefits if they joined the union, which made them feel intimidated and scared. In February 2022, we heard about the Memphis 7, a high-profile case of retaliation and termination against a group of mostly workers of color. Their firing had a chilling effect on me and my coworkers as we saw the company betraying the very values and mission that these Memphis workers were upholding. Despite our fears, we were inspired by the courage and power of the Memphis 7 and filed for our election a month later in March 2022. A week after we filed, they replaced a sympathetic store manager, but it backfired as more people got on board with the union. In April, our store won our election by a landslide, 26-5, despite all of the threats and intimidation. Starbucks retaliation and union busting ramped up even more after we won our election. We were constantly being watched, and managers listened in on our conversations through our headsets. Store hours were constantly changing, and hours kept getting cut. People were fired right on the shop floor. They fired 7 of our union members, 2 of them were shift supervisors. 2 partners requested medical and maternity leave, Management refused to sign off on their leave, and they were terminated. Several people quit, including my wife. Some of us were told that we should look for another job. In July, I led a 2-day unfair labor practice strike and delivered our demands. A month later, I was fired for supposedly being disruptive. I did not receive any write-up or discipline, and there was no investigation. I was fired after organizing like so many union leaders across the country. I have filed an unfair labor practice charge with the NLRB seeking to be reinstated at Starbucks. Starbucks and big corporations have a lot of power and money, and they are willing to pull out all the stops to deny workers a voice and a seat at the table.
And they normally get away with it.
That's why I am thrilled to be here today to have witnessed firsthand Howard Schultz being held to account for his company's illegal behavior. We are coming together to demand better pay, affordable health coverage, and stronger safety procedures. I'm proud to be a leader of this new labor movement. We're taking on corporate power and fighting for all of us. One day, my daughter is going to be able to look up her dad on the internet and find out that I fought for a better future for every Starbucks worker and for all working people. And I know she'll also read that we took on one of the most powerful corporations and won. That's why I keep fighting, and that makes everything worth it.
These are powerful.
Saxon, thank you very much. Our third witness.
I'm curious to see what the
Sharon
Republican
Block, a professor of practice
is going to be.
The executive director
there's
of the
two
Center for Labor and a Just Economy at Harvard Law School. For 20 years, she has held key labor policy positions across the legislative and executive branches of federal government, including here at the Help Committee and in the NLRB. Ms. Block, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Cassidy, for inviting me to testify today. It feels a little bit like coming home. I want to make clear that first that I am testifying in my personal capacity and not as a representative of Harvard Law School. In light of my long service with the NLRB, I'd like to start my testimony by recognizing the great work done by the NLRB career staff with regard to the Starbucks campaign, handling hundreds of cases over the past 18 months. I know them firsthand to be consummate professionals and dedicated public servants. Next, I'd like to address the purpose of the National Labor Relations Act so that we understand the consequences when an employer denies workers the rights guaranteed by the Act. The NLRA does not guarantee that workers will be represented by a union or that if they are so represented, that they will secure particular outcomes at the bargaining table. Instead, it guarantees to them a fair process to decide for themselves whether they want to exercise these rights. It is always the workers who make these decisions. It is not the employer's decision. So thought of in this way, you can say that the NLRA establishes the rule of law for the workplace. And so the question for this hearing is whether Starbucks respected this workplace rule of law or has undermined the ability of workers to be treated fairly in their quest to decide for themselves whether they want union representation. I'd like to make three main points in the remainder of my testimony. First, the scope of Starbucks violations alleged and found so far is beyond the scope of the anti-union campaigns that I have witnessed during my career as a labor lawyer. Second, these violations should not be understood as isolated acts, but rather should be viewed as a coordinated campaign to stifle union activity across the company. Finally, it is critical that this kind of egregious conduct is taken seriously because otherwise it will send a message to workers across the economy that their rights are as disposable as a paper Starbucks cup. First, I'll address the scope of the violations. As you have heard already, Starbucks is facing more than 500 allegations that it has violated the NLRA, and already career board agents have found merit in more than half of those charges. In addition, 4 board members from both political parties and 7 career administrative law judges have concluded that Starbucks has committed violations of the Act. While it sadly has become quite common for companies to respond hostilely and often unlawfully to organizing campaigns by their workers, I'm not aware of another company in recent years that has had this many allegations leveled against it or this many allegations found to have merit. The egregiousness of many of the violations also makes this campaign stand out. For decades, board law has deemed the firing of pro-union workers during an organizing campaign as a hallmark violation. That is, a violation that is likely to have significant impact not just on the worker who is fired, but also on the organizing rights of coworkers. Already, the General Counsel and ALJs have found more than 20 Starbucks employees have been fired because of their union activity. These discharges and other hallmark violations found is conduct that goes to the very heart of workers' rights under the Act. And in the words of the ALJ who reviewed Starbucks' anti-union campaign in Buffalo, Starbucks has engaged in egregious and widespread misconduct, demonstrating a general disregard for employees' fundamental rights. That observation leads to my second point. What has happened at Starbucks is not just a collection of individual violations. It looks more like a company campaign to stop the workers' campaign in its tracks. Each time the company commits a new violation in a new location or at a new stage in the union's campaign, it is communicating to all of its workers that the rights accorded to them by the law can be defeated, that the company has the resources, the will, and the stamina to undermine the exercise of their rights at every turn. Therefore, I'm also concerned about the wider message that Starbucks' vast anti-union campaign sends. Workers across the country, especially low-wage workers, have also been inspired by what the Starbucks baristas have achieved over the past 18 months. But what do these workers and the public think when they see that Starbucks is willing to break the law that protects these rights hundreds of times? I commend the committee for holding this hearing to show that you take seriously workers' rights to organize and to sit at a bargaining table if they choose, even if their employer is a huge company that really doesn't want them to have a union. It's a bedrock of our democracy that the law applies to everyone, including the most powerful. So I believe that much is at stake in ensuring that Starbucks workers' rights to unionize are protected and respected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Mock.
Now we get the Republicans.
Senator Cassidy is voting, so I'm going to introduce his witnesses. Former Representative Bradley Byrne served 4 terms in Congress and has more than 30 years of experience as a labor and employment attorney in private practice. Mr. Byrne, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've submitted a written statement. I won't read that to you. I do not represent Starbucks. I do not have a position about whether they have or have not committed unfair labor practice violations. I do not have a position on whether they should or should not be organized. I believe that it's up to the workers, and I trust the wisdom of the workers at the Starbucks stores to make those decisions in appropriately conducted elections. I'm here because I represent a whistleblower, a longtime employee, professional employee at the National Labor Relations Board, who has come forward to the Inspector General of the National Labor Relations Board with information that there have been significant irregularities, violations of the neutrality of the organization of the agency during at least one such election. Now, why does that matter? The process that we follow in these elections is very important.
During one election?
Because as the previous speaker said, it's to make sure that the employees
the amount of time Starbucks has broken the law
decision.
in each of these cases.
It's not to protect the management of the company. It's not to protect
and you
the
have an
union.
anonymous source claiming that
NLRB.
one case was maybe done incorrectly.
To conduct what we call laboratory conditions from the time a petition is filed until the time you have an election. That means you've got to make sure that the voting environment is free, that there isn't any coercion, and most especially in this case, that the NLRB isn't putting its finger down on one side or the other. They shouldn't favor the employer. They shouldn't favor the union. They should be professional and neutral in all cases. And in my experience, the vast majority of the employees of the NLRB do exactly that. Unfortunately, we know that in at least one case that was violated. It was violated egregiously, and a hearing officer found 4 different violations. Now, here's the problem with all that. If you do something that challenges the integrity of the process, you've challenged the integrity of the vote. And if you challenge the integrity of the vote, you've challenged the integrity of the entire system. Because remember, it's there to give the employees the final decision, not the company, and certainly not the union. So what I would like for this committee to do is to use its oversight authority, which is considerable, to look into what happened, not just in this one case, but to determine if there is a pattern in practice at the NLRB of violating their neutrality obligation.
Government is so largely pro-corporate, anti-labor. The idea that there is like
is that pattern in practice
this
being
one
directed
single
from
case that these people
people in
are
higher
pointing
echelons
to
of
try and
agency?
discredit
I am
all of
very
this is
concerned
so
by
dishonest.
public statements, public positions taken by the General Counsel of the NLRB. The General Counsel is a political appointee. There's nothing wrong with that. That's true when you have Republican presidents, just like it's true when you have a Democrat president. But whether you're a Democratic-appointed NLRB General Counsel or Republican-appointed, you have an obligation to maintain that neutrality. You have an obligation to follow the law. What this General Counsel has done is attack the process for elections altogether. She wants to do away with elections. That greatly disturbs me. It flies in the face of long-settled law, and it also flies in the face of what I've been hearing a lot about recently, and that is workplace democracy, workforce democracy. Well, if we believe in workplace democracy, we ought to give employees the right to vote as to whether or not they want a union. If they do, as they have done in some of these Starbucks elections, that's the law. They get to have a union represent them. But in many cases, they vote no. In the vast majority of cases where I represented an employer representation election, the employees chose not to have a union represent them. Fine. Whichever way they vote is good. But they ought to have the right to hear both sides of the story, which they won't have if they don't have an election. And they ought to have the ability to walk into a secret place and cast a secret vote so that no one is coercing them
So that
to vote
only the
whichever way they
employer
want to vote.
has pressure over their
So I
vote
asked
and
this
no one else.
committee and the Congress to look at this very carefully because of the seriousness of the situation. It should be all of our concern that we make sure that we have true integrity in these elections so that the result is final and fair. I thank you for the opportunity to be here and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Byrne, thank you very much.
We got to see who the last person
Rachel
is, and then I probably got to
Breslau
go.
Is a senior research fellow in economics at the Heritage Foundation.
Oh, really?
She previously served as a senior economist at the Joint Economic Committee of Congress. Ms. Gressel, thanks very much for being with us.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Bring that mic closer.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay, hold it close.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. First, I want to recognize the important role that unions have played in U.S. history in securing important worker safety protections, just wages, and giving workers a previously unheard voice. Many of the things that unions fought for are now protected by law, and the globally competitive economy has empowered individual workers and ultimately weakened unions' advantages. For example, when the only cars that Americans could buy were those that were produced in the U.S., the United Auto Workers Union could impose above-market compensation. While that benefited union workers in the short run, it meant more expensive cars, fewer people able to afford them, and fewer workers needed to produce them. When foreign competition entered and unions maintained their excessive compensation demands, automakers began shuttering their doors, and domestic auto production today is 1/3 of what it used to be 2 decades ago. In addition to shifting to more service-oriented jobs, American workers have become more educated and more mobile. The average worker changes jobs 12 times throughout their career, which means pensions built on decades of service are less desirable. And rigid pay scales may work for 9-to-5 jobs where everybody produces 20 widgets a day, but few jobs today are so routine, and most workers want to be paid based on what they contribute. Consequently, union advantages have been waning. Since 2007, non-union wages have increased 56%, while union wages have increased only 41%. And union pensions have recklessly promised $677 billion in pension benefits that they haven't set aside to pay. Instead of adapting to provide new services that workers value, unions have turned to political force and inciting animosity. Depicting company management
all of this is
12-foot
bullshit.
diseased rats
All
is
of this is
dehumanizing
bullshit. None
and
of it's backed by
destructive.
any data. Here's the actual
Most
data.
people want to be part of a
I'm sure you've seen
team,
this before because it was
not a
in this
battle.
hearing.
In
and I've shown it many times.
positive workplace relationships are
As-
the biggest indicator of employee satisfaction.
Let's translate it down.
Most people also don't want their money taken to
As membership declines, income inequality increases.
unions spend more money on politics.
This is for everybody, not just those in unions. The existence of unions benefits everybody because it raises the standards for what is acceptable in the workplace. But back to this clown, and I actually really got to go probably in like a
national
minute. So
unions
let's just see
that
what else.
spend a lot of that money on politics. Unionization hit an all-time low of 10.1% last year. And in part, that's because employers can be more responsive and accommodating to workers' desires.
No, that's because
without
of
a
massive
union
corporate
dictating what they
interests
can and can't do.
affecting the political process.
Instead of wooing workers, unions are trying to forcibly
Okay.
reverse their decline through laws that would take away workers'
All right, I gotta go.
privacy,
If
their
you wanna see
secret
the rest of
ballot
this shit,
elections, the right to work without paying
me,
a union,
give
and
you
the
the link
ability
here
to be their
in
own
the
boss.
chat.
But instead of forcing workers into one-size-fits-all unions,
Maybe there's some good questions coming up, but
alternative worker
there's the link.
organizations could benefit more workers.
I gotta go though.
For
So-
example, Major League Sports bargain collectively for
Turn
some
this lady
things.
down. This has been fun. All right. Fun time. Thanks all for coming. Is there a super chat I haven't gotten to? Neon says, any spicy takes missed between Mitt Romney's bootlicking and the break? Probably, but I don't remember. There's a lot of time between those two things. All right. Thank you all. Goodbye.